Everybody, thanks for joining us again on a Friday night for Head to Head, a Star Wars show. We got a great show lined up for you guys tonight. We're going to be bringing you some Mandalorian Season 3 updates. We've got Disney Plus might actually be rebooting the sequel trilogy. That's right. They've talked about it, but it might actually happen. What else we got? Oh, we got a challenge between Darth Vader and Mace Windu. But first, we're going to talk about the Knights of the Old Republic game. It might actually be rebooted, and it's going to come to you right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So it's been kind of an exciting Star Wars week.
Yeah, man, we're getting some interesting news that's been kind of coming out the woodworks for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the interesting thing about it. There is never a shortage of anything Star Wars related or anything like that these days.
Right.
But now it looks like the news, instead of being for the video games and, you know, like movies and stuff like that, we're actually getting just a total gaming thing now.
Yeah, we're getting some gaming stuff, of course, some comic book things. You know, there's a tons of stuff that's been coming out, even some series stuff. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun show today.
All right, well, let's get after it. We're going to talk first, of course, about the Knights of the Old Republic game, and it's coming to you right now. All right, so it looks like my favorite game of all time
Yes.
is actually going to be finally being rebooted.
Yeah, so, and it's not just yours. A lot of people, you know, pretty much have hailed as Knights of the Old Republic as like the best Star Wars game of all time.
It is. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
the
actually
story.
one of the greatest games ever. In fact, a lot of people count it not just as the best Star Wars game, they actually count it as one of the best RPG games ever.
Yeah, and you know what really sold this particular game is the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I started playing it. I never finished the actual game, but I heard there's like a big twist at the end.
Wait, you never really finished playing the first one?
Nope.
Really?
Really?
Did you ever do the second one?
Nope. This is at that point in time, you know, just being able to focus on gaming was just kind of hard for me at that time. So, but I did, and I think you had it on the computer, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I remember I had it on Xbox.
The funny thing is now you can play it on the phone.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things now. So, this whole thing with Knights of the Old Republic, though, is actually one of some of the people's favorite stories out of the Star Wars franchise. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it kind of takes place 4,000 years before the events of the original trilogy. And, you know, you're kind of following this particular Jedi as on his journey. And, you know, we're starting to find out some really cool Sith Lords, you know, like Darth Malak and Revan being kind of the iconic ones in this particular series. So, but of course, when Disney took over and they decided to reestablish canon, a lot of people are asking, well, does that include the games such as Knights of the Old Republic? And so you and I have often mentioned that Revan is kind of, we don't want to say mentioned, but he is shown in The Rise of Skywalker. If you look, when Kylo definitely comes to, well, Kylo and Rey, when they actually come into Palpatine's little quarry, if you will, you do see like this giant statue of Revan. So that kind of pretty much cemented, no pun intended, since he was a statue.
Oh, that was bad. But no, that's true. I mean, it's one of those things that they have been slowly, because look, people have been begging for this to be canon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even the Old Republic period, if you really stop and think about it, it hasn't really reached that same level that some of the other stuff. And then one of the biggest fears, of course, is now that they got the High Republic going on,
Right.
you know, it's just going to keep sort of overshadowing the Old Republic quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, and with this, you know, with canon, you know, that's kind of the tricky thing because, you know, they keep playing with it, and a lot of times, we've talked about how sometimes they get too close to certain things, like even the High Republic. Okay, it's 200 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, but that's still pretty close, especially for someone like Yoda. But then, or that particular character. Now, Old Republic takes place 4,000 years, so it's like, okay, now you're not even dealing with Yoda at this point. But there's still a lot of things. So that's a whole landscape in the world that you actually really truly can explore without ever having to really deal with Palpatine or Yoda or any of those type of characters. You can really truly have that space to kind of play around with and really tell some really good stories.
Well, the thing that's kind of cool to me about the way that all this stuff is working is the fact that even in the Old Republic, you basically had stuff like, you had like a Yoda-like character in there.
Mm-hmm.
You had like a bunch of different characters that kind of resembled what you would see normally in what we would think of as like the normal Star Wars universe. You had Wookiees, you had, like I said, Yoda species. You had some of this stuff. So I think that it's not really a stretch because you do have the familiar characters. And I think that, because there's always been that fear that, well, if they release an Old Republic game, people are going to be completely lost. Nobody's going to want to, bother with it. I mean, it's just going to be this big mess, pretty much, as far as canon goes. And I would agree that maybe when they were doing the sequel trilogy, it's kind of like, you don't want to just drop, this total like Old Republic stuff in there, because you'd just be like, everybody would be freaking out. Like, we don't even know what this is, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see that this thing is actually making somewhat of a comeback, because you pointed out the whole Rise of Skywalker thing.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely announced their intention when they put Darth Revan in there, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is that, one of the big, I guess, pieces of drama in this is that the original creators of the Knights of our Republic aren't doing the game.
Yeah, I know. That was really weird to me.
So as a gamer, and I know how much you love gaming and how much you love Knights of the Republic, does that concern you?
It does. I mean, I have to say that it concerns me a little bit, but it depends. I don't remember, did they happen to mention who actually was going to be doing the game?
Well, because everything is kind of under Disney, it's kind of like under Lucasfilm Games. They're the ones who are kind of
I mean,
doing it.
The thing is this going to be the very first Lucasfilm game? That's going to be one of the things that could be an issue.
Yeah.
If this is the very first of any of the games.
Yeah, because BioWare and EA are the ones who made Electronic Arts.
Right.
Are the ones who did all the Star Wars games. So it's either one of those two companies. But now that you're having, once again, everything is falling under the Lucasfilm umbrella, and now you have Lucasfilm Games, and then you're bringing it back, and you're kind of maybe possibly making some changes to it, that could actually ruin it for a lot of fans, because for like yourself and others, it was the story of Knights of the Old Republic that really had everybody just like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it really depends. It depends on a couple of things. And I think that this is what you really have to look at overall. Number one, you have to look at who is actually writing the story.
Right.
I think that that's really going to be the biggest thing of anything, is who is actually writing this story. And then, obviously, if Lucasfilm Games, that's kind of like a weird thing to remember.
I know, right?
Because I keep wanting to say LucasArts, because LucasArts is...
It might be LucasArts Games, but I know it's still...
I don't know. I think you're right, man. I actually think it was Lucasfilm's Games.
But, it's one of those things where... And it's funny because the people who originally did Knights of the Old Republic left BioWare. So... Now you're wondering, like, okay, are they coming on board here?
Oh man, that would be cool,
but we don't know. And I think that's kind of like where everybody's kind of like, okay, don't screw it up. Like, you already had a good thing with Knights of the Old Republic, don't screw it up.
Yeah, well, and that's it, because one of the things about Knights of the Old Republic that made it really fascinating was it wasn't just a linear, like two-dimensional storyline. I mean, it actually was broad. It went into a bunch of different directions. There were, of course, all the little side quests that you can do. There was just so much that you can do. It was pretty much, it wasn't as open world as something like, say, Elder Scrolls, but it was for its time. Because you have to remember, I think this game came out in like 2003. Was it 3?
Yep.
I thought it was like 2.
Well, yeah. Well, it's 2003.
Okay. So when did Knights of the Republic 2 come out then? Around 05 maybe?
Somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there, yeah. And the thing is, and that's what's really funny, because even if you look at the difference between Knights of the Old Republic 1 and Knights of the Old Republic 2, there was a definite quality difference between the two. Graphic-wise and everything, it was pretty much about the same. Playability was pretty much about the same. But what was different, though, was the fact that the story just wasn't as good, and the characters weren't quite as compelling. And see, that makes a big difference. That's one of the things that people ignore the most in games, is that, you know, they go on and they talk about the playability and the graphics and all this stuff. But honestly, especially in an RPG game, if you don't have a really good, compelling story, you know, that I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I know it's one of those things where you don't. Once again, it's all about the fans, and you always want to keep the fans in mind. You want to give them what they want, and the fact that they're able to play this game now on their mobile devices,
which I think is the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I'm seeing like commercials and stuff like, yeah, you know, download Knights of the, I'm like, really? I'm like, wow, that's.
I know, man. I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, where it's just like you could play it on your phone, and that's the thing that's so funny, is that at one point you needed to be like on some really super powerful PC or something,
right, to get the graphics and everything. But now phones are shooting in 4K now, so I mean, you don't even have that problem.
Well, but, and here's the interesting thing to me about this whole thing is, like I said, because they actually threw Revan in Rise of Skywalker, it makes me wonder if they're going to circle back now, you know, and give us Revan, because I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. Like, okay, how far did you get when you were playing the game? Like,
man, you asked me to go.
Well, I mean, I know.
Yikes.
So your game playing's a lot like your reading, I see.
I actually did more reading than gameplay. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, though, and this is what's really funny to me, is the fact that you are not the first person that I talked to that had said that, where they had played through it. And it wasn't that they didn't enjoy it, but it does take
it takes
a little bit of time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just giving, you know, the lightsaber and everything. I mean, you don't even start off with a lightsaber. You got this like stick thing, and then you're trying to, you know, put this whole thing together. But it's cool because, once again, you know, it's kind of taking you through that whole experience. But, well, let me see. Ronaldo also has something. He says, would you prefer a remake or a legitimate sequel?
Oh. A remake or legitimate sequel?
Yep.
Ah, that's tough, man.
Yeah. And then he also says, to be fair, the mobile version is pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. That's actually a tough call for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, see, I would say, if you're going to do anything, do a sequel, because at least you're not tarnishing something that was already successful. I would rather you do something, try to come out the gate with something brand new. I mean, that's what kind of fans want anyway. It's just, even if it doesn't land, I mean, at this point, what's different than anything else you've been putting out? But, which is not necessarily the best thing. However, at least you're not trashing, you know, that's almost like saying, like, do you want to redo A New Hope? Like, no, don't touch that. You know, it's already successful. Leave it alone.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. It depends. It depends on where they were going to go with the sequel. That's really part of my issue with the whole thing, is the fact that if you do a sequel and you do a legitimate Knights of the Old Republic 3...
Because that's what I was going to say. Is it a sequel to 2, or is it going to be, are they redoing the second one and doing...
See, this is why I think that... yeah, but I mean, that's why I'm saying that I think it's a little bit too convoluted. Like, you almost do have to reboot it. Because look at it like this. Okay, even though I already know that these characters are established and all that, number one, not a whole lot of people in the, I guess, the fan base at large are really familiar at this point with it. I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag in a way, because on one hand, whenever you say Knights of the Old Republic in the game, a lot of times people do legitimately go, oh, yeah, I loved it. And look, they did put Revan in The Rise of Skywalker. So it was kind of a fan service thing, right? But my issue, though, is that if you make a direct sequel, you would almost have to make a direct sequel to 3.
I mean, the 2.
Well, yeah.
3 would be the sequel to
3 would be the, exactly.
Gotcha.
3 would be the sequel. So if you did that, it would be a little strange, because it's almost like one of the problems that I had when they made the Indiana Jones movie was the fact that they did it 10, 20 years later or something stupid, right? Like the last one was 89, and then I forgot what year this stupid thing came out now.
Talking about Crystal Skull one?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah, like, what was that? 07, 09, somewhere in there. I mean, it was pretty much like 20 years or coming up on that. And it was, I mean, there was a lot of it that I liked. I mean, I thought the ending was kind of stupid or whatever. But I mean, the point is that when you do something like that, you have to do it right. Now, for instance, with Top Gun that's coming out, I have a lot of high hopes for that.
Yeah.
Even though the sequel came out, like decades ago, or the original came out decades ago. Still, I think that they could actually do the sequel and it'll be cool. But a lot of that is because it's almost like the sequel trilogy in a way, where if they had done, say, like Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and Last Command, if they had done the Timothy Zahn trilogy, the original actors, at the time that they were making it, the original actors would have been about the same age that they would have been at the time. Even though I think that was a little bit closer to Return of the Jedi, it still dealt with like an older Luke, Han, and Leia. Whereas something with Knights of the Old Republic, I'm not entirely sure where they left off with the story. And to be honest, I don't exactly recall Knights of the Old Republic 2 that much, because, like I said, I wasn't really that into it. But I played through it, and I mean, it was cool, and I mean, it wasn't terrible. It's just the problem is that it followed 1, and 1 was just so good.
Yeah.
Ronaldo
has one. He says, I wonder, is this the open world game they announced? Because Knights of the Old Republic has never been a true open world game.
Yeah, I know what he means. Knights of the Old Republic, it was kind of an open world game, but not really. Not in the sense, again, when we think of open world games now, we think of stuff that's more like the Elder Scrolls stuff, where it's just like completely, you could do pretty much whatever you want.
Right.
Whereas this was still, you could go and you could do a lot of different things, but there were still like parameters and stuff like that, still boundaries that you basically had to follow.
Just very loose ones. Gotcha.
Yeah, they were loose. Like, it wasn't as restrictive as some games, because there were some games where it was just like, it was so linear. I'm trying to remember what this one game that I had. Remember the Sega Genesis system?
Of course.
Yeah, man. I had the Sega Genesis system, and I had, they actually released Might and Magic 2 for it, which was one of the first games where it was a little bit more open world. And that's kind of how it was. It was open world in the sense of like the Might and Magic series, where there were still walls, like with Elder Scrolls, starting with, I think, Oblivion, which was 4, and then Skyrim was 5. You could, I mean, in those games, you could do anything you want, to the point where you could literally play those games in any fashion. If you're like an action game type of person, you can play it like that. Because you could go, there was like an arena or something, and you can fight in that forever. You never even have to touch the main quest.
Right.
You could just either do a bunch of side quests, or you could just do a bunch of, fighting type things. If you're more like the exploring type, you could just explore the world. I mean, the quests will be there if you ever want to get to them, but there's no time limit. There's nothing really preventing you from doing that. in Knights of the Old Republic, it was similar to that in a way, but it wasn't quite as vast. Number one, it wasn't like this huge game because the Elder Scrolls game, like especially Skyrim and all that, those things are so big. But these other games, like a Knights of the Old Republic, I'm trying to think of other games that were similar to that. But pretty much any of the games that came out around that time would have basically had that same vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, in answer to Ronaldo's actual question, I think that what I would rather see is more like a soft reboot. And in that, what I mean is that I would like to see them do something along the lines of maybe take the characters and take the basic outline of the story and then just change certain elements to it. You know, like you don't have to make an exact duplicate of the thing, but just, you know.
Gotcha.
I mean, basically, take the basic story.
Plagiarize it.
Well, you know what? Almost like what they did with Thrawn.
Yeah, and that's what they...
Because if you think about it, they didn't exactly write Thrawn, and they didn't do with Thrawn what Timothy Zahn did in his original trilogy.
Right, and they mentioned that, like, even how they did them in Rebels, like, they kind of changed some things, but it was still relatively true to the character. I got you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's one of those things that they could take it, because one of the cool things about now is that the technology is such that you could take a game like Knights of the Old Republic. I think that's the reason why everybody's so excited about it. It's because you can literally do anything you want with that game. You can make it true open world. You can make it to the point, and this is what we want from a Star Wars game. Give us a game where you can choose from different characters. Like, we could do this. I'm going to ask you the same question. I'm going to say, okay, if you can make any kind of Star Wars game, what would it be? So while you're thinking about that, I'll tell you what I would do. I would make a game to where you can choose, almost like how in a lot of those RPG games, because a lot of them take place in kind of the realm of, like, you know, knights and elves and ogres and orcs and you know, wizards and all this stuff, kind of like the fantasy realm, right?
Right.
So what I would do is you could choose a different kind of class. Are you a bounty hunter? Are you a smuggler? Are you, you know? And then you can also choose the race. You can choose pretty much like you can in all those games, but it would just be more of a Star Wars slant. And then just make it to where, kind of like how Skyrim is, it really would actually go along the lines of The Mandalorian. Because I think I even said that in one of the Mandalorian reviews. I said that The Mandalorian is almost like the TV show version of an open world Star Wars game.
Yep.
We're basically, okay, you're this Mandalorian character. You're going on all these different quests. So you have the main quest, which is he has to get Grogu to the Jedi or whatever. But then as he goes and he gets information, which is going to take him to his next destination, he has to solve a problem. Yeah, I'll give you information. But first, you have to free my village from
this crate dragon.
Yeah, or whatever it is, right? And that's kind of what the whole thing is when you're dealing, with these games, is the fact that it's like, okay, while you're following the main quest, while you're trying to achieve the next part of that main quest, it unlocks a bunch of side quests because these people are like, okay, yeah, I'll give you this information, but first, you have to free, and it's usually something along those lines. It's always, you got to free my village from something,
Right.
but you can just give it a Star Wars slant, and that's probably what I would do.
Honestly, I would kind of do like almost like the Padawan's journey to becoming a knight. So I would kind of like, you can have different Padawans, like you said, of, different races. And so you might have like a Rodian or a Wookiee or, Twi'lek or whatever. But, you have this, Padawan, and they kind of start off as like, okay, you have to accomplish certain tasks. You have certain masters that will teach you certain things along the way. You go through like your little, each level is like part of your trial. So like, okay, lightsaber combat here, force abilities here. You have to be able to do this. Diplomacy. So there's different things that you have to, like different missions that they send you on to kind of strengthen you to take your test at the end of the level. And of course there's things like, okay, you have to learn how to fly, different fighter pilots. So you're getting all of the different parts of Star Wars where you get to dogfight, and being able to lead, or stormtroopers on a particular mission. So you have to kind of strategize and come up with something like that. And then all the while, so now, of course, at the very end of the game, if you are so fortunate, then, you get your Padawan braid cut, and then now you're elevated to a knight.
Now, is that the end of the game, though? Or does it actually go on, and now you have to start to take, what I'm saying?
You could play it like that, or, after that night, after you've been knighted, now you can just go, now they can dispatch you on different missions for different stuff.
Yeah, see, that's what I would, but so now are you talking like strictly, is it more like an action type of game, or is it, are we still dealing with the whole RPG thing, or what?
It's kind of like, I think it's kind of like a combination of them, because like, I would love to just see, or even like, because I've always would love to see like a series like that, like almost a Padawan, and really just kind of take you through the life of what a Padawan goes through. So, you're going on these different, like you get assigned a master, and then, you go on certain missions with your master. And then once you get to a certain point, all right, now you start going on your own. Almost like how we saw with Ahsoka. At first she was always with Anakin and Obi-Wan. And then once she got to a point where she could start doing stuff on her own, now they were like, all right, well, Ahsoka, take Rex and them and go over here. And, so now she has to kind of like do this, but it's all kind of strengthening your ability to complete missions, allows you to kind of, further up your force abilities, for furthering up your lightsaber combat. So now you're getting points off of that. Along the way, you have to make decisions like, okay, you're tempted to use a dark side power. Like, well, this person won't give me this information that I need to complete this mission. I could force choke them and kill them, or, I could, like find I could Jedi mind trick them if that's possible. If not, then I might have to use some form of diplomacy. And so then you're, like I say, you're still acquiring all these different skills that all Jedi generally possess until you get to the rank of knight.
Now, see, that's what I would do. What I would do, and I forgot to point this out, because this is true in a lot of those RPG games, is that when technology started moving on, so as you got later in the 2000s, and then, of course, up through now, you started to get the whole deal to where how you played the game actually affected the outcome. Mm-hmm. Like every decision that you made.
Right.
And that's what I think would be really cool in a Star Wars game, is that, yeah, are you going, and if you play as a Jedi, are you going a little bit more toward the dark side or the light? Or you actually have the ability, like, okay, you could use a dark side power, which might get you what you're looking for quicker, or you can maybe use the light side, use a Jedi mind trick, or maybe try to persuade them, or something like that.
Right.
And it's a little bit slower, but, the path would be different. Mm-hmm. And so then the ending of the game, or the outcome of the game, would actually be determined
based on
by all these, it's an amalgamation of all these choices that you made throughout the game.
Right.
And so I think that would be kind of cool, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be my game.
Dude, yeah. I mean, I can hang with that.
Yeah, and that way you get a little bit of Star Wars of everything, so you can kind of do all right, you got to lead rogue squadron on this particular mission, so you get the dogfight, and you have that. So if you want, aspects of that, you can kind of just do that. If you want, the typical, going into battle and with a bunch of stormtroopers, you have that. You have all these different types of missions that you kind of can take to kind of help you eventually achieve the rank of knight.
Yeah, see, now to me, that's how it would be very similar to like a Skyrim type of game or something like that. Because say that you were just into the whole piloting a ship and pretty much getting into dogfights into space. Well, as soon as you got to a point to where you could do that, you could just stay and do that forever. Mm-hmm. The idea in those games is that there's no boundaries. You could play it any way that you want. And I think that that's one of the problems that we've had in the Star Wars universe. Well, I shouldn't actually say in the Star Wars universe. It's really more like there's been a lack of really good games. That's one place where Lucasfilm and Disney and all that have basically dropped the ball since the sale to Disney. Once it became Disney property and LucasArts was no more, the games just sort of suffered a little bit. I mean, sure, they've had a couple of them, like Battlefront 2 was cool, but Battlefront, the first one, was a disaster. And I'm talking about the remake, not the original ones.
Yeah, they had Jedi Academy. They had Obi-Wan. Remember I had that game?
Yeah, like back when it was LucasArts and all that stuff. Yep. You had X-Wing Fighter. You had TIE Fighter. Of course, the 2 Knights of the Old Republic games. I mean, you had just like a plethora. And then, of course, the 2 original Battlefront games were great.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like ever since it became Disney's property, the games have just gone downhill completely.
Yeah, they've been basically almost non-existent, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you know, the only way that you would get a halfway decent game is when a Lego game came out.
Right.
I mean, how sad is that?
Yeah, because they were focusing so much on the movies, and they wanted to get the movies, you know, kind of back out there. And that's what they were drawing all their attention to. But I think also you kind of have to look at that the movies a lot of times, you know, spawn the game. So I think that's where they were going with it. That's probably why they didn't know really what to do and they weren't releasing any games. And then, you know, now because can you imagine now in the Last Jedi game? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
like,
you know there'd be like a whole Canto Bight level.
Oh, my. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's just, So, I think that's that's the other thing is they're not planned. You know, so I mean, in a way, I'm kind of glad Disney didn't do it because it probably wouldn't have been planned truly like the rest.
I don't know though, because you do have games like Jedi Fallen Order. Now, I haven't personally actually played it, but I have watched a couple of run-throughs through the game. You know, a bunch of game playing stuff that you can get on YouTube, especially Twitch. All you guys that are watching us on Twitch right now, you know what I'm talking about. Where basically, you know, you're watching these gamers play through these games, and the playability is cool. It does add a little bit of additional canon information. So every once in a while, Disney will get it right. Every once in a while, you know, they'll come out with a game, and you're like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. I wish we'd get more of this stuff.
Right, like I love Force Unleashed. Like, that was amazing.
Yeah, but that came out before
Disney, right?
See, that was like at the end. Well, yeah. And then they even had The Force Unleashed 2, if I remember correctly, too. And that was cool. And, you know, I think we did a show on them possibly bringing in...
Oh, what is his name?
I know. We're so bad at this. We're the Star Wars fans that know nothing about Star Wars, apparently. This is going to drive me nuts. Ronaldo, you got to bail us out on this one, buddy. It's like right there. Oh, if only we had these devices that could tell us...
Only Ben were here.
Dark something. Dark.
Well, it's made by Dark Horse. That's
no,
good.
It was dark lighter. Or, no, that's
Biggs.
Yeah. No, but it's something like that, though.
Galen Merrick.
No, that's not it.
Yeah.
Force Unleashed?
Yeah.
No, Vader's Apprentice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, his code name was Star Killer, but his...
Star Killer, that's it.
Maybe that's where you were going
Yeah,
for.
that's where I was going.
So I'm like, yes, it is.
You're like, look, dude, I'm reading it right now.
So, yeah. But actually,
Which they actually were saying that's where they got the Star Killer base name from.
Yeah.
But they kind of ripped it off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, that would have been cool.
Yeah. So, Ronaldo has a few.
I can see that because usually I can tell when the shift in conversation happens and you're looking at chats and...
Yeah. So, Ronaldo says... I would like a game where you can create your own character and watch the events of the movies from your perspective. You would start in, and then he also says, you would choose to be good or evil, but the characters from the movies would be your guide. And of course, it would be totally open world. And he also says maybe Jedi Fallen Order may be the best one. Probably since the Disney takeover.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That Jedi Fallen Order is probably the best one. Like I said, I haven't personally played it, but I got a lot of friends who have played it, and they all rave about it, said that I should get it. I almost actually got it on sale.
He also says if you haven't played Jedi Fallen Order, imagine if Uncharted and Dark Souls has a baby.
I could see that. I could actually see that because just from the way that some of my friends have described it, it's kind of what it. In fact, they compare it to Uncharted a lot, and I've heard a few friends compare it to Dark Souls as well. So I mean that's right around where it is. But the problem is, and I don't remember what they said. They basically said there were a few issues with some of the gameplay, though.
You need a third act?
Like it had a third act problem. No, it wasn't. It wasn't anything like that. It was something to do with It was something to do with the playability, actually, because everybody says that the story is fantastic in that thing.
Okay.
But for some reason, there was something that prevented it from just being like the absolute best game, basically.
Yeah, Battlefront had that issue too.
Well, the first one, especially we're talking about the ones that have been made under Disney. Yeah, the first one was actually, like, the graphics were just outstanding.
Yeah. And
same thing with the second one. But the second one improved on the first one. The first one had a problem with playability. Like, it was a really clunky, clumsy game,
yeah, it was weird,
to try to play. And and plus it didn't really go anywhere. I mean, it's one thing to have, because I actually don't even think it had a campaign mode, which is fine with me, actually, because I don't usually play the campaigns.
Yeah, that's not your thing.
No, I mean, in one of the Call of Duty games, I ended up playing the campaign, but what I don't like about it, it played a little bit like Battlefront 2 in that sense, because it's one of those things that you play and you try to achieve something in it, and then if you don't, it just puts you at the beginning of the level, and you have to basically go through like almost like 3 different stages, and then you get to the next level, right? And then the story furthers. And in Battlefront 2 especially, I mean, there's a lot of like really cool things that would happen. Again, from a canon perspective, it's cool. And then of course, Aiden Verso, I remember the name this week. She's a really cool character, and of course she's introduced in this. But what I really liked, though, is that the campaign mode in that game was fun. Usually in some of the games, and with Call of Duty, I heard that some of them are better than others, but I just generally don't do it because of that. It's not like an open world thing. It's more like you're being guided and moved into certain things, and to me, it just isn't as much fun as the multiplayer mode where you can run around the whole map and do whatever you want.
All right.
Now, they tried to take care of that a little bit when they created Warzone, because that actually has a campaign kind of vibe to it. But to me now, it's kind of like if I just want to play like 2 or 3 quick games, I can't do that with Warzone. So that's where I think that they have to strike the balance. In these open world games, what I love about those is the fact that you can stop pretty much anywhere and it'll pick up. It's not like you have to get to the next point or the next marker before it'll save the game. Because otherwise it'll put you like right back at the previous level or whatever. See, that's what I hate about a lot of these games.
Right. You just want to kind of pick up from where you left off and just
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, okay, if I leave off at a certain scene or whatever, that's where I want to pick it up from.
Right.
But in a lot of those campaign-based type games...
Yeah, you have the checkpoint. So
yeah, exactly. That's it. You got like those checkpoints. And if you're in between 2 checkpoints...
then it's going to revert back to the last...
Yeah, or you absolutely have to make it to the next one. And the problem is, as they got more sophisticated, what they started doing was like the checkpoints were insane.
Yeah, they were spaced out. So now if you... in between, you might have to start all the way back, which might have taken you like 4 days just to even get there,
right?
Yeah.
Or, just like hours of playing the game, or you're kind of in the middle, right? So you've achieved a couple of really difficult or defeated a couple of different difficult enemies or whatever. And then, now you're kind of like, oh man, but I've got like 3 more battles or whatever I got to get through before I get to the next checkpoint. And that's just so frustrating.
So you just hit pause and just...
Just let just don't turn the game off. And I've done that a couple of times. I mean, it used to be that you would just totally like just ruined back with the whole CRT tube TVs and stuff like that. You'd burn an image in and all that. But, now, yeah, you could do that, turn it off, and everything's cool. But those are the kinds of things that I think that they have to look at when they're putting together these games. Because, and Ronaldo alluded to it, I mean, they've been threatening to do this whole open world thing forever, man.
Yeah.
This has been a thing that they've been threatening to do, honestly, since the end of Knights of the Old Republic 2. And anybody that says that they're not really open world games, they are correct to a large degree, because they're open, again, within their boundaries, but there's definitely walls that you would hit, figuratively speaking. Well, sometimes literally, too, but... that you can't go on beyond certain boundaries.
Right.
That's actually one of the frustrating things in Call of Duty, because, you'll get to the edge of the map, let's say, to where if you were to jump over into the next area, you'd hear like all these like alarms going off, and you'll automatically die if you stay there too long. But there's been a couple of these maps that I'll look beyond the area where, that's playable. And I mean, they're so detailed.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, well, why would you even put this much detail in this thing if I can't go over there and look at it? It's like, right, I'm looking at some build. It's like, I want to go over there. Either that, or I'm like, dude, that's a good sniper position over there. Let me go there.
Right.
And pick off the people, But now it's like, you can't go and you can't appreciate what they've done. Whereas in an open world game, it's like there's no wasted space at that point. I mean, anywhere that you go... And that ties into the Mandalorian, because that's where the Unreal Engine comes in handy. It's like anywhere that you go and look, it's like everything keeps refreshing. But to you as a player, you see it as this whole seamless environment.
Right. Ronaldo has some things. He says Fallen Order has some glitches, but not as bad as Battlefront 2.
Yeah.
Mother Vance was asking, are you guys thirsty yet? I hope she's planning on bringing us something.
It's not. No, I'm good. I've got a way head start on the cantina already. That's why I had to keep burping. That's why I probably shouldn't be drinking pop while I'm talking on these shows. For a long time, I was trying to do like non-carbonated stuff, but
After a long work day, you need some energy.
Absolutely.
Ronaldo also says, did you ever have the glitches where the dead bodies start flying in Battlefront 2?
No, that sounds interesting. That's a glitch I think I would want, actually.
And even Ronaldo said that was funny. He said, if you can get a canceled game revived, which would it be? And
look at this. Ronaldo is basically inventing segments for us.
I know. He said he probably should be like in the Clear Your Mind segment. And then he said for him it would be the Darth Maul game.
I actually kind of forgot about the Darth Maul game.
Me too.
What was it?
I don't know. That's why I forgot.
I don't actually remember any.
I think if I'm not mistaken, it was coming out roughly around like Phantom Menace time, of course, like after.
Yeah, well, it had to be before you would start being resurrected and appeared in literally every single Star Wars project since.
Mm-hmm.
Now it wouldn't be a big deal. I mean, he literally went from being this one and done guy to where everybody's like, well, you know what? He was a pretty cool character. It's almost too bad we can't see more of him. And now he's like in everything. He's literally the cornerstone of the saga at this point. Because the only thing he hasn't really appeared in...
It's the original trilogy.
Yeah, and the sequel trilogy. But, I mean, he's been all around it, though. So, yeah. I don't know. As far as... So, what game... The idea is, what game...
That was canceled, would you want to revive?
Okay. Oh, probably the... what's it called? The... 13...
1313?
Yeah, that was it.
The whole Underworld? Yep.
That would be the one. Because that was actually supposed to be... So they've actually, for anybody out there that doesn't know, they've had a bunch of games, actually, that they had canceled, mostly because they had sold off Lucasfilm.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what they did was they took a lot of the games that they had in development, and they put them pretty much on the shelf or whatever with the idea that they were going to develop them at a later date, and then they just never did. Now, my theory is because what they've done is they pretty much just completely dropped the ball in the games. They mothballed LucasArts, and then they never really put anything in its place. And instead, I remember the announcement when Disney was like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to outsource the games. And that's when they went to people like BioWare and EA and all that stuff, which actually, on the outset, sounds like a really good idea, right? Let the game makers, these guys that are pumping out these kind of games regularly, let them take the mantle and run with it.
Right.
Problem is, these guys have a lot of other games that they're developing as well. And so what ends up happening is you get a situation where it's going to take you like 2 or 3 years to get any kind of a game out. And I think that this is part of why Lucasfilm decided, you know what, let's get a gaming division back. And let's concentrate on making our own games. The other thing, too, is that because they have to make sure that the continuity remains in canon, if they're the ones doing it, then they pretty much have all the control. They don't have to worry about giving away information that could be leaked or anything like that. So I would say that 1313 game, though, that was really cool because that sort of had I think it was going to be an open world game, and it was, it was going to basically be all about
the underworld of Coruscant.
The underworld of Coruscant, kind of like in Season 7 of the Clone Wars. They did that, and I think we actually showed the footage of the unproduced, like they did some
like some
test footage or something like that, and they did a couple of scenes of what would have been the series. I mean, that thing sounded amazing to me.
Yeah. Ronaldo also says, long story short, it was going to happen in the Star Wars Legacy era, and Darth Talon was going to be playable.
Really?
And Darth Maul and Talon would have been similar to Batman and Catwoman and Darth in Arkham City, which I love that game.
Yeah, which one did I have? I had one of them for...
the Batman one?
Yeah.
Arkham Asylum?
Was it Asylum?
Asylum.
I might have had Asylum. That came out before City, right?
Yeah.
When did City come out?
I don't know.
We're just...
Well, I mean, I'm not a... I mean,
it's a good thing that you're going to come to this channel for news, everybody.
Well, listen, I play games, but I'm not... I would never consider myself a gamer. I just like... There's times where I have time to like, oh, okay, I like that game. It looks cool. I want to play it. But I'm not like a gamer where I have to come home from work and like get some games in. Like, so...
I only get that way with one game at a time. You know, it doesn't help that one of the partners in our company, he's like 10 levels ahead of me now in Call of Duty, maybe more now. I mean, there was literally, I think over Christmas break or whatever, I saw where he was at, and I'm like, okay, I got to catch up to him. And I spent something like 4 or 5 hours a day for a few days just playing, just trying to catch up to him. So there is that extra motivation I get sometimes, but usually I'm not... It mystifies me that these people could be playing like all these games constantly.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I just don't have that kind of time.
Right.
You know, I mean, I would rather be doing other things, but I do love whatever my game of the moment is. Yeah. And it's basically just been all the Call of Duty games. Whenever a new one comes out, I get that one. That becomes my thing. And I just, you know, I try to get in a couple of games in a day or whatever. And it's kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, I consider myself sort of like a lightweight gamer. I'm a gamer in the sense that I love them, but I just don't have the kind of time I would love to be able to put into it. Right. Yeah, that I just can't devote the time to it. But oh man, I mean, there's just so much potential that they could have if they would do it right. That 1313 game, I pretty much forgot all about it until this conversation. Was there any canceled game that you remembered that you can... No,
not that.
You're like, man, I don't know.
Oh, man. No, I don't. But I do remember the 1313 one, though. And I remember us talking about, like, how cool that would be just because it's dealing with, like, you know, the smugglers, you know, all those kind of guys. So.
Well, I'll tell you another one. Now, I don't know if it's technically been canceled, if it was kind of a... We even did a show on it not that long ago where they were talking about they were supposed to do a Mandalorian game.
Well, yeah, I remember. Yeah, there's talks about. There's still talks about it that it may be coming out. That they're kind of like maybe preparing for an actual Mandalorian game.
It kind of makes me wonder, though, man.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully we'll see what they do with Knights of the Old Republic, and I think we'll wait for the true gamers to kind of feel it out and see what if it's comparable to the original, and we'll see if it's actually a direct sequel to 2 or if it's a reboot of 2, and
Yeah, we'll just have to see. But in the meantime, let us know what you guys are thinking. I mean, are you excited about a Knights of the Old Republic reboot? Would you rather see a sequel? Let us know in the comments section below. Or maybe you guys think that they should just leave well enough alone and develop another game. Let us know whatever you guys are thinking. All right, so what do we got next?
Next, we have Duel of the Fates.
All right, so what do we got this week on Duel of the Fates?
Ah, yes.
I love to say that.
So this week on Duel of the Fates, we have who will win in lightsaber combat between Mace Windu and Darth Vader.
Now, this is one that we were going to do last week.
Right.
But then I came up with the Mara Jade versus Ahsoka Tano one, which we're kind of like, let's go with that one. And because we were already talking about Mara Jade anyway, it made sense. So now, yes, I've been looking forward to this one. And it was funny because somebody saw this at work or whatever, and they were like, wait a minute. Didn't pre-Darth Vader, like Anakin, or like pre-suit Darth Vader take him on and, cut off his hands or whatever? I'm like, yeah, I know, but this is a little bit more like a fantasy matchup.
Yeah, and that was like, he was kind of like not expect. That was kind of like a cheap shot, really. It's not like they were actually dueling each other. It was kind of like, I thought you were my friend. It's almost just like if we're standing next to each other and all of a sudden I just punch you out of nowhere. Like, the heck was that for?
Right, exactly. And that's basically what it was. Like you said, it was kind of more of a cheap shot type of deal. But this one's kind of difficult. This is a tough one, man. I'm not going to lie, because I purposely, as you know, I don't usually put a whole lot of thought into these beforehand because I like to keep the spontaneity of the show. Mm-hmm. I probably should have thought about this. Offhand, no pun intended, because both Mace and Vader technically lost their hands, but... Oh, man. I'm not usually this stumped on these things.
I wonder what Ronaldo thinks. We have it. So Ronaldo says, Vader, I can't see Mace doing something to him.
Offhand, I would kind of go for Vader only because he's just ultra powerful in the dark side and everything. But you know how I am. I always have to get these like ridiculous clarifications that are probably overthinking this, but it's got to be said. When are we talking about? Because I would give it to Mace if it's earlier, when Vader first gets the suit, like maybe within the first 6 months or something, because it's known throughout canon where Vader basically, when he first got the suit, he was having issues. Like he couldn't, in fact, now I don't think that this carried over into canon, but the original Darth Vader or Rise of Darth Vader book that came out like right before the whole Disney sale. And basically it was talking about, and I think they actually wrote a similar scene in the new canon. I don't remember if it was a comic or maybe it was in Lords of the Sith or one of the things, but Vader actually had problems taking out a Padawan because he wasn't used to fighting in the suit and is a little clumsy, and he almost got himself killed, basically. However, when I'm reading all these Vader comics, and I just got done reading the latest issue like a couple of days ago, Vader is just so ultra powerful in the dark side of the Force, and he's such an amazing fighter. I mean, the stuff that this guy could do is ridiculous. So I would say I'm going to easily go with Darth Vader if we're talking like year and a half into the suit.
So you're saying like Rogue One era Vader?
Yeah.
We'll take out Mace, basically.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going with Mace Windu.
Of course you are.
Yes, I am. True battle today.
Yeah, this has got to be a true battle.
Yep. So, Mace Windu, I mean, the guy is a phenomenal Jedi. I mean, you have to look at it from the standpoint of he's only second to Yoda. Now, about how far or about how much we would never know. However, you know, the thing about him is that he's kind of the better swordsman, like out of everybody except for Yoda. And the fact that he's created his own style where he can channel the dark side himself, I think he would prove to be a match for Mr. Vader. Even so much because when you look at it from the standpoint of watching Rebels, you know, Vader was getting his butt kind of handed to him by Ahsoka. So Mace Windu, the guy who actually was going up against Palpatine and he didn't get wiped out by everybody like everybody else. Yeah, I think Mace wins because once again, just as powerful as Vader is in the dark side of the Force, don't get me wrong, but Mace has way more time. He has way more experience. So as Vader's growing, Mace is growing, but Mace has time on his side. So I think he even gets even more powerful as he gets older. So if Mace actually had survived and actually made it to, like, let's say a Rogue One, I don't think Vader would still be able to take him out.
Well, I think part of the problem, though, and this is something we brought up last week with the Ahsoka Mara Jade thing, is the fact that we really don't have a lot to go on with Mace. Like, first of all, because he doesn't, well, we don't know. I was going to say, he appears to have been killed at the end of 3. I personally have been arguing for a long time, ever since that movie came out, actually, that, you know what? He could have survived.
True.
I mean, it wasn't like he had his hands chopped off and he was thrown out a window. Now, granted, people had brought up, yeah, but he had, you know, all this lightning and stuff, and, you know, he was kind of critically injured. But look, he was pretty conscious. He was screaming as he went out. It wasn't like he was that critically injured, other than the fact that he had no hands and he's falling out a window. He could have easily have used the Force to slow his descent and, you know, land or whatever. I mean, he could have survived pretty easily. Not saying he did, although Lucas said he did, because Samuel L. Jackson wanted him to. So he basically said it, and Lucas was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. He survives. But of course, we haven't seen him in anything since then. You know, it would have been nice if maybe he popped up in the sequel trilogy or something, right?
Right.
And there's rumor after rumor after rumor that he's going to pop up in one of these series that's coming out. Could be the Ahsoka series, which, I mean, at this point, I think if there's going to be any kind of Jedi thing, that would be the series to put him in. Don't necessarily think he fits in the Mandalorian, but, I mean, you could shoehorn him in there. It's tough to say. But it would be nice if we had maybe more comics or something like that, which I know there was a series that came out that featured him, and I'd have to read that. But that's what I would have to go on, because I'm not necessarily going by Vader in the movies. Although, you could. But, I mean, you do bring up a good point, though, with the whole Palpatine thing. Because Palpatine's Vader's master. And it's like, look, if he could go toe-to-toe with Palpatine, but then I get the... It's weird. I don't know if Palpatine was really trying. I think at first he was, but then as soon as Anakin came there, he actually was like, hey...
I can use it to my advantage.
I can use this to my advantage. Let me play the, you know, poor, pitiful politician that's being beat up by this Jedi guy. I mean, even though he already knew he was a Sith Lord, so I mean, it's
Right. It's kind of
it's like, well,
the cat's out the bag, guys.
yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing is that Anakin wanted to bring him to justice, and that's the thing that I think was really cool was how he used that, and that goes back to something that you and I talked about on that one show that we
About how
basically,
powerful
about how powerful he was and what made him powerful, and it wasn't so much his actual force power, it was the fact that he was just such a good tactician,
Master manipulator. man.
master manipulator, all this other stuff. That is the true power of Palpatine. So it's really, I don't know, I don't know if you could just look at that as a straight up battle.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think that once again, I don't think Vader would be able to withstand someone as powerful as Mace Windu, because any Jedi that he's ever faced, you know, outside of Obi-Wan, which Obi-Wan was like a doddering old man at that point, and you know, Obi-Wan kind of saw that, okay, you know what, I'll be better off as a Force ghost because then I'm unlimited at that point. But I mean, like I said, Mace Windu being the second most powerful Jedi on the council.
I'm just starting to think about the whole thing because, you know, Obi-Wan was studying being a Force ghost because Yoda basically gave him the homework, right? That, okay, look, taught to Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon figured this out. Part of me just is imagining, you know, Obi-Wan's like, okay, it's time for me to do this, and going, man, I hope I'm doing this right.
Right.
I hope I didn't forget anything. I hope I'm not messing this up. Because
Right, yeah, I only got one shot at this.
I only got one shot at this. There's a lot at stake.
But yeah, I mean, I just think that with Mace, you know, given his power, like I said, being second only to Yoda, a master swordsman, created his own style. So much that style was pretty much forbidden to be taught. And he only taught it to, like, the only people who knew about it was Yoda and his Padawan, and Mace's Padawan.
Well, and I know there is that whole thing about how, you know, he kind of dipped a little bit into the dark side of the Force, and
right, to kind of boost his power up a bit. And so for somebody who's always super powerful anyway, he was a great leader. He was a great tactician as well. And then, like I said, I just don't think that Vader, looking at Vader, how he got his butt kicked basically by Ahsoka, you know, and that's his Padawan. It's kind of like, all right, you know, you're talking about Mace Windu here. And I just think that
you can't go by that though, because there was a little bit of that emotion that he was feeling.
Emotion crap. I don't
and
wanna hear
he
that.
was, again, he wasn't in the suit that long.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I still don't. He was still doing
Trust
stuff.
me, if you started really reading a lot of these Vader comics, especially this series, the one that they're in now.
I mean, the fact that the man can generate red lightning is just like, okay, it's super impressive. I mean, that alone, and Palpatine.
Besides that, and then the web of, or the I lost it just
the web of lies that you
bog or the bog of Ronaldo knows what I'm talking about. Getting through that creature, just taking out all these army stuff, because basically the latest thing that he's had to do in the comic is he wasn't allowed to use the Force. That was something that Palpatine threw on him, and he had to like go up against like these more ancient Sith hunters and all this stuff. I mean, he's kind of powerful.
Oh yeah, I mean, no, I'm not saying that he isn't.
And even though, yes, Mace is like second only to Yoda on the Jedi side of things, it's really difficult to say, because again, if we knew where Mace was at, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And don't get me wrong, like, you know, he's still technically the chosen one. So, I mean, I get it. You know, he's still like conceived of the Force. So that puts him at a different pedigree, sure. But of course, we knew that he wasn't at his full zenith because, you know, half his body's missing.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, you know, it evens the playing field out once again for Mace, who's had more time. And I'm just looking at just pure time of studying the Force longer than Anakin has. And the fact that he ascended to the rank in which he did, it just, to me, it just stands to reason that, like, that's almost like saying, like, well, Vader could take out Yoda. And it's just like, nah.
No, that would be different.
That's what I'm saying.
But Yoda's way ahead of Mace, though. That's what everybody forgets about.
We know that, but by how much, though? Like,
Quite a bit, actually. They've dealt with that in some of the novels, that it's kind of like Mace may be number 2, but he's kind of...
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't know, like, okay, is it by, like, 10,000 or is it about, like, 100,000? You know what I'm saying? It's just
this is one of the things that I'm hoping to get in the High Republic, is the fact that... Because even Yoda, if you look at Yoda's powers, you basically get all this context about how powerful he is, but you can't quantify it.
Right. And but once again, you have to look at Yoda based on time. Like, this man doesn't, the way he ages, just by sheer time that he has, of course he's going to be the most powerful, because what else has he got to do?
Well, the other thing that you got to look at Yoda, I think it has really more to do with his species than the time.
Well, that too. Definitely, we learned that from Mandalorian.
Yeah, sure. Like, Grogu's like 50 years old, and he's still like basically a toddler, but he's force choking people and doing, all kinds of crazy things, right?
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. No, I'm not saying his species does not play a significant role in it, because it does. But what I'm saying is that plus time. And so I'm thinking, like, looking at somebody like Mace Windu, who's had, once again, Anakin came in, he's still like, he's like 9 years old. Meanwhile, like, Mace is probably like 38 years old at the time. By the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, Mace is probably like in his mid 40s. So if you just carry that on to, like, okay, let's say Mace is maybe like 60, at the time, he's still more knowledgeable just because he's studying the Force a lot longer than Anakin has. And the fact that, like, once again, he went up against Palpatine.
Well, I would say that, but again, up until the comics and the books are doing a lot more to fill in the blanks, but we knew this anyway. If you're going, like, say 5 to 10 years before Episode 4, this is where Vader's really at his true zenith. Even though, it's implied he's still there, even in A New Hope and Empire. It's just really isn't until Return of the Jedi. But even then, it wasn't like he was weak. It was just Luke was getting a lot stronger, and Vader, once again, was letting emotion get in the way a little bit because it was his kid, and he was starting to have that internal conflict, which was kind of messing up his dark side power. But I think that ultimately what you have here is that Vader is just so crazy powerful because he studied all these Sith holocrons and all this other stuff. So he had the benefit of studying the light side of the Force. Plus, it's kind of like a Dooku thing almost.
Right.
But yet even more so. And that's why I think that in Mace's case, the case for Mace is that you basically need to fill in the blank of his past. Because I think that would really shine a light on some of the things, at least power-wise, where he stands. Just from some of the books, like even Darth Disciple. Darth Disciple went a little bit into Mace's thing, too. And I forgot, you had, of course, the novelizations. There was stuff like that. But, you really did have a lot of... you had a lot of things that were implied when it came to him. But it would just be nice to know. And that's one of the reasons why I'd said, well, if it's earlier in Vader's career, then yeah, I would totally give it to Mace. Because Mace is also probably, he's used to, I'm sure, dealing with pretty powerful Force users himself.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's the number 2 guy.
Let me see. Ronaldo has a lot. I think it would be harder for Vader if he was in the suit, so he agrees with you on that one. Mother Vansa was like, that's my boy, I'm for Vader. This is hilarious. Ronaldo says, don't worry, guys. When Star Wars finishes his fan film, we'll see the answer. I can't wait for that thing either, man. That's... Yeah,
that's... I know, because how long? I wonder how long that's going to be till it's completed.
I have no idea. Well,
maybe Theory is watching the show to get some ideas. I wish.
I know, right? And then he answers your question. Eye of the Webbish Bog.
Eye of the Webbish Bog. Thank you. See, I knew he would do that. That's so nice. Thank you, Ronaldo. Yeah, well, it's just, I think that, and I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And again, depending on where Vader is, I agree with it. And I also understand the whole idea of, well, okay, he's really knowledgeable in the Force. But the thing is that Vader's really amped up his knowledge of the Sith stuff, because it even deals with where it's leaving off now. He had just gotten the Sith Wayfinder. He's going to Exegol now. So the next issue is going to see him going there. And that's the reason why that Sith Wayfinder was able to guide Kylo there without too much of an issue, is because Vader's already sort of cleared the path, and he's gone there himself. So it's really, I mean, this Vader series has actually really been outstanding. I think I just finished with issue 9 or something like that, and I think 10 is coming up, and then 11 will be coming up a little bit after that. We also got the High Republic next week, issue number 2.
Yep.
At some point, I will get to the Light of the Jedi book, because that's really where I'm starting to get curious about stuff, is that I think that we need a lot more stuff from the High Republic to fill in some of these gaps. Now, we're still a little too early for Mace, because like you say, he's probably like 40-ish, maybe in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, probably close. Yeah.
Somewhere around there. I think we can agree that that's sort of like a median age. Could be a little older, could be a little younger, but right around there. So, we're still a little bit too far for him. But it would be kind of cool to see some things, from that point. But the important thing is, what do you guys think?
Yes.
Who do you think would win in a battle between Mace Windu and Darth Vader? Well, I mean, you and I have been pretty much drinking all this stuff like through this whole show, but what do you say we hit the cantina anyway?
Hey, let's go.
All right, let's do it. All right, so we are talking about the Disney sequel now, yet another reboot. It seems like every single time we turn around, somebody is talking about how they're going to reboot the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, so apparently it's up to Disney.
Now
Plus.
what?
Yeah, right. It's basically been floating that they're preparing to reset the sequel trilogy by using unused footage of Han, Leia, and Luke. The retcon will happen in a 3-season show.
Wait a minute. Time out.
Personal foul.
Now,
too many people on unsportsmanlike conduct, or
did you just say unused footage of Han, Luke, and Leia?
I did.
Okay. They had just told us that they basically went through all the footage of Carrie Fisher and used like every ounce that they had to essentially give us that whole, I guess, like to wrap up her story pretty much for episode 9.
Right.
Now they're trying to say there's even more footage.
Well, from a certain point of view, see, they had enough footage to tell her story for 9, but maybe that also there may be some other footage that they couldn't have used because it wouldn't have worked, but it worked for maybe earlier. Aha.
I don't know, man.
We'll see. So this is the retcon will happen in a 3-season show that will feature 10 episodes in each season. And
this isn't coming from We Got This Covered, is it?
No, it is not.
All right.
Each season will rework the events of the sequel trilogy film, starting with The Force Awakens, then Last Jedi, then Rise of Skywalker. The reboot would include unused footage of Han, Luke, and Leia, filmed during the sequel trilogy. The scenes wouldn't be CGI. According to the Express report, the scene was filmed during the making of the sequel trilogy. The rumor also suggests that George Lucas will return as a director for the new miniseries.
Of course. Might as well you might as well combine all of your rumors, right? If you're going to do this, you might as well do it big. Let's just have everything. In fact, they're going to even say that, hey, we have some unused footage from these guys from Return of the Jedi that we can use, and actually make this entire new thing.
And there's also going to be Darth Maul, who
Yeah. Oh, that wouldn't surprise me exactly. Darth Maul is the main antagonist now,
right?
along with Crimson Dawn.
Yeah. So, yeah. What would you think about that? I think I already know, but just for have it on record, let's just.
Here's the thing. They're in a weird place because what's happening is they're paying the price for their lack of vision.
Oh, come on, Palpatine.
Oh man, I love it when
Palpatine.
Hey, when the brain works,
It works.
it's good, right? But I think that one of the problems that they had was when, of course, and look, this is legendary, and we're not the only ones that say this either. I mean, pretty much anybody that has a YouTube show that talks about Star Wars will talk about the lack of planning on the part of Disney and Lucasfilm, and that they should have put a little bit more thought into it instead of this whole choose your own adventure thing.
The RPG version of Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's almost like that, except not cool, right? So
It's hilarious.
rather than actually come up with a story arc, like a general story arc, and talk about, like, okay, here's how the story is going to start, here's how it's going to end, here's roughly what happens in the middle. Now, everybody go and make your movie. You have to start at this point and you have to end at this point, but then you have a little bit of leeway to what happens in between that. If they had done that, everything would have been fine. Problem is, they didn't do that. And so what's happening is now they are left with a mess. The fans don't really like it. Everybody, once again, is pretty much like Disney killed my childhood kind of a thing, right? Like what they used to accuse George Lucas of. And now, what's even worse is they've come up with The Mandalorian, and they've come up with all this other stuff. And it's like, man, we're on the right track here. It's too bad we can't just remake the sequel trilogy the way that The Mandalorian's being made, or the way that we're going to deal with Ahsoka now and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then somebody at Lucasfilm is probably going, well, wait a minute. Maybe we can.
It's a Back to the Future episode.
Well, kind of. What it actually reminds me of, and here's where I stand on this. I was actually all about this when they were talking more of a soft reboot.
Mm-hmm.
This would happen over a pretty long span of time. We're probably talking like 5, 10, 15 years even. To where what they could do, and nobody would even notice it, I don't think, if they did it right. And that is, you have all these series now that are coming out, and you start to seed out these different things. And maybe you have some movies that support some of the series, right? And you just, over time, sort of morph and tweak the story until you're getting to the point to where the sequel trilogy is, and then you just continue on, and you're essentially rebooting it. But see, it doesn't matter, because now you have this army of source material that's come up and led up to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, just if I were going to use the ending of The Mandalorian as an example, where Luke comes back, slices up a bunch of dark troopers, and then takes Grogu and starts to train him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's just say that they went on with this whole thing. And they kept making content about how he's training people, and he's doing all this stuff. By the time you get to the point to where Kylo would come around, you could actually change whatever you want. Maybe you still have a Kylo Ren. Maybe you still do some of the stuff, but you change a little bit. Maybe Luke isn't disillusioned anymore. Maybe he comes in, whatever it is you want to do. The point is, if you have like 5 or 10 years of source material that's leading up to this point, nobody's really going to care. But if you're talking about, okay, only like a year or two after the last of the sequel trilogy movies, you're going to come out with some new miniseries or new thing, that might be a little bit harder of a sell.
Yeah. I mean, I see your point. I mean, like I said, I'm just curious to see how they would do it.
I would be open to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us will, just because we didn't like the sequel trilogy.
Yeah,
like myself.
exactly. It's
I
kind of
mean,
like, well, let's see what else you got.
But then once again, if it's true, like that George Lucas is going to be the director, now that would be no. Let me take that back.
Yeah, be careful. No, well, there is.
Like if he kind of produced it, but like Filoni, like he worked.
Yes.
With yes. So if he was kind of like behind it, but like Filoni and Favreau, they all kind of collaborated and then put it out there, I will be fine with that.
Well, there's two things that you have to look at that I think are intriguing about this, because they're essentially what would make me go, you can't do this. One of them is a Han, Luke, and Leia problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you already had the original actor. Like, it'd be different if for the sequel trilogy, let's just say they couldn't get Harrison back, or maybe they only got Carrie back. Maybe they got one, but they didn't get all three, right? So, if you had to move on and do a new 7, 8, and 9,
mm-hmm.
but you did it without the original cast, but you had the original cast
in
this other sequel trilogy,
right?
People are just going to be like, look, man,
what the heck?
That's the real one.
Yeah.
The one with Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher.
Right.
You can't undo that one. The only way that this works is if you can somehow de-age them, or if you have this whole vault of unused footage of Carrie Fisher or whatever.
Well, no, I mean, I think if you took somebody like, okay, because honestly, the X factor is Carrie Fisher.
Yeah.
So as long as you can because you have Harrison Ford still alive, you paid him enough money, I'm sure he'll do it. And then, of course, you still got Mark Hamill, who still loves to do stuff anyway. So, okay, if you have it where you just recreate certain scenes and maybe only the scenes that you have Carrie Fisher in, once again, it just fits. But you kind of morph like Han's story and Luke's story more so as the focal point, and Carrie's just kind of around. You can make it work.
Yeah, you can make it work. I can't. I would love to see how they're going to try to sell that to Harrison. It's like, yeah, you remember how all those decades you want Han Solo to die? Well, the good news is you technically got your way. The bad news is, yeah, we want to redo the whole thing.
Well, I mean, he may not care as long as he still dies. You can still have him die. It just depends on, once again, how it's done.
That's not how the Force works.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just thinking, like, once again, just depending on the story.
I don't think that they would do that. Honestly, I think that if they were going to do this whole little reboot thing that they want to do, whether it's soft, hard, I don't know.
Even if they had a hard reboot, like, it still could be like.
I don't think they're going to kill anybody off.
Well, I mean, now I can understand. It would make more sense if you didn't kill Luke off. You could still kill Han, because I don't want to say like Han doesn't matter, but I mean, if you're in the grand scheme of things, if Rey is to be the next Jedi or whatever, it's really supposed to kind of set that up.
Well, but you're assuming there's a Rey.
Well, I mean, you almost will have to. I mean, like I said, if you're going to keep things.
Not necessarily. What they could do, well, okay. They could almost have that. I'm just thinking back to like the whole Heir to the Empire and all that stuff. Because if they're smart, look, if they're going to redo something, they almost, I don't know, I can't really speak for them, but they almost have to do the Zahn trilogy at this point. I mean, do you actually think that people are going to accept a new sequel trilogy that's not that, if they're going to redo it?
They're accepting a new Justice League movie.
Well, it's not really new.
Well, I mean, saying it's a different version. It's a completely
not really. They were saying there's like maybe like, I forgot, it's some low number of actual new footage that's in it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. Even if you did, that's what I'm saying. Like, even if you did certain things, like, okay, if you took most of the story of the sequel trilogy, but you just took, like, or you may have, like, in my opinion, as long as Luke makes it to probably Rise of Skywalker.
Oh yeah, well that's one thing that you have to do no matter what you do. But my point is, like, okay, the Zack Snyder Justice League thing,
right? You
can't count that. That's almost like the Richard Donner Superman 2 thing, because that was the original version. All they're doing is restoring the original version.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, if you kind of place Han in a situation where it's like, okay, Han can still die, Han can, and that all can happen, But if you just do it in such a way where it's like, okay, now we kind of have a better story where it makes a little bit more sense. Maybe you don't have Palpatine come back. Maybe you just have it at Kylo. You know, I mean, you could do it different ways, but as long as it just makes sense, and it's like, okay, this just has a better story, and maybe, you might have elements of, Colin Trevorrow's in there. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, Trevorrow's, the whole Duel of the Fates thing, that depends greatly on The Last Jedi.
Well, yeah, no, that had a lot to do with Leia too.
That too. But it also, I mean, it just said, it's almost like if you're going to reboot the sequel trilogy at all, it's almost like you'd have to start over. I mean, I can't imagine them wanting to use a lot of the same characters.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I would just like to say, if they actually planned it and they actually did it correctly, if you got Lucas in there and you got Favreau and Filoni and said, look, we can save this by doing X, Y, and Z. All I'm saying is I'm willing to trust them.
If it's Filoni and Favreau, they're definitely doing the Zahn trilogy. I would say that almost unequivocally, because if you think about it, they're doing a lot of like expanded universe type stuff and bringing in, a lot of the familiar things and stuff like that. Because I would be hard pressed to figure out what story would they want to tell. Right. Yeah, I mean, there is Lucas's original treatment too, which I don't know. I might be like, you know what? Let me just go ahead and do the whole messed up sequel trilogy, because at least
you're right. Let me go to Ronaldo's questions, or statements, I should say. Well, his first one is a question. This is not Mike Zero news, is it? No, it's not.
Yeah, he's the YouTube version of we got this covered.
Right.
Yeah, basically.
I think it's time to forget what happened with the sequels. They are there. They are canon. Just leave them alone and let's move on. He also says, I would not have a problem if it were with different actors. I would prefer it. And if this happens, I think they won't use Rey, Kylo, and the others.
Yeah, I would definitely say that would be the case.
What if they decide to use Lucas' ideas for the sequels, midichlorians and stuff? Because Lucas is there, I can see him not wanting to do his story. I can't see him not wanting to do his story. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, all these are good points. I mean, for one thing, I understand the desire to want to remake the sequel trilogy, because it's one of those hindsight is always 20/20 things.
Mm-hmm.
You look back and you're like, man, it'd be nice if we can do this now, especially, like I said, once they see what's going on with the Mandalorian and stuff like that, they're probably like, oh, and the fans like it. It's like, oh, maybe we should have done something different with the sequel trilogy. On the other hand, it really does. I mean, it was such a big deal when those things came out, and they made so much money, and they're burned into the people's consciousness.
Well, and then, Mother Vansel says, leave it alone. If you're going to have to reboot, just start over. See, my thing is I just feel like it's kind of like when an athlete like stays too long, and somebody like a Michael Jordan, or now we're about to have a Super Bowl like a Tom Brady or something like that, where you got these guys who quintessentially are like the greatest of all time, and then they try to stay too long past their prime, or past trying to still be that competitive person. It's like you just have to realize that you're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of feels like that with Star Wars, because if you were to reboot this, it kind of tarnishes bringing back Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher. Now you feel like she died in vain almost, because it's like, well, if you reboot this whole thing, what does that say about them? And you think, John Boyega was mad before. No, because now you're completely erasing his whole work, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, even Daisy Ridley. I mean, like now these, all these great people, because then now it's like, okay, well, does BB-8 not matter anymore? He's not canon now. Kylo Ren is not like.
That's what I'm saying.
Like if you do that, it's like you're completely eradicating like these people who who are really excited. I mean, I would just feel bad for them personally. Of course, Kelly Marie Tran was like, see, now you know how it feels. It's like that Loki moment.
Well, but again, I think that it's one of those things that I don't know.
That's why I say you can keep those people, but you might have to just create some things around it to kind of support it a little bit better.
Well, what they could do, they could almost work around it by going in that timeline. Because if you think about it, I mean, Luke Skywalker was basically in exile for a while, but we don't really know what he was really doing. I mean, he left for Octo. I don't remember how long did they say he was on there? Because he had disappeared and they didn't know where he went, but we don't necessarily know that he just went directly to Octo and that was it.
Yeah, I mean,
he could have done anything.
My question is, do you think you could do this if they redid the sequel trilogy? Could they do it without Carrie Fisher at all? Let's say if they started the movie off with the death of Princess Leia was hard on Han and now he's battling his thing with Kylo, being like a single parent or something like that, and his, he wants to bring his son back to the light side for Leia, and he need Luke's help to do it. You could maybe do something like that because you can't really. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
The thing is, if you were to do something like that, if you're going to reboot this thing at all, it seems to me like you can't work around the original version of the sequel trilogy at this point. Because then why bother doing it? If you're going to actually keep characters from the sequel trilogy and even some of the story, but just morph it a little bit, I think that the fans that like the sequel trilogy are going to hate it. The fans that hated the sequel trilogy are going to hate it just because it has all the people in it that they don't like. The only way that I think that they can get around doing this...
But I don't think they didn't like the people. I think it was just...
There's a lot of people that didn't really like the character. I mean, there were some characters that a lot of people liked, sure, but...
I mean, Kelly Marie Tran's character, of course,
yeah,
but we know that. But, I'm just saying, I don't think they had issues with necessarily the character.
It would just be too weird. It would be too weird to see this other. Can you imagine they change Finn's whole thing? And I mean, yeah, they're gonna reboot it and keep the characters. I say, great, let's bring Phasma back and actually have her do something. And
yeah, let's get rid of Benicio del Toro and Canto Bite. And,
exactly. You just kind of remake it like that. But I don't think that that's what's gonna happen because they've set things up. And I think what's been setting this thing in motion is that whole Luke Skywalker cameo at the end of The Mandalorian. I think that's where things have started to... Because even Disney now is probably realizing, oh, I guess that's what we should have done. Is pretty much... And again, giving the fans what they want is not always a good thing, and it's not always a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, there is good fan service, but there's also bad fan service.
True.
You don't want to sacrifice a good story just because you're afraid a fan won't like it or whatever. I mean, I personally thought that them doing what they did with Luke Skywalker was very realistic, according to the in-universe plot.
Right.
And it made sense. On the other hand, and, we talked about this a lot, where I think that they just let it go on too long. I don't think that they could have just had a scene where he was disillusioned and then she brings him back. And yes, that would have been cliche, but hello, welcome to storytelling. I mean, if you think about all the classic stories and stuff like that, the hero's journey, all these storytelling devices that they use, it's like poetry. There's certain things that, it's a motif, and certain things repeat and things like that. There's rhythm, there's rhyme. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And yes, it becomes cliche, but that's classic storytelling. And that's actually what Lucas wanted to do. Everybody forgets that the reason why Star Wars was made was because George Lucas lost out on getting the rights to Flash Gordon. He actually wanted the rights to Flash Gordon. He lost to actually Dino De Laurentiis, who made the classic 1980 with Queen soundtrack and all that. I love that movie. It's actually supposed to be a trilogy, and of course, unfortunately, it didn't do well, so we didn't get the other two movies. But the point is when Lucas lost out on Flash Gordon, he was like, you know what? I'll make my own Flash Gordon. And that became Star Wars.
Right.
So I think that ultimately, if they're going to do this whole reboot thing, it's almost like they can't. They just have to go into the direction that would be staying away from the characters that we were actually introduced to in the sequel trilogy.
Okay.
Their best bet would be to do the Thrawn trilogy because everybody liked it. And it's familiar, and it's there. Otherwise, you're going to have a third alternate universe. Because if you think about it, the Legends books are still in print. You could still buy Heir to the Empire. And I'm not saying that you actually have to make those books verbatim. You could do what they've been doing.
Yeah, like with Thrawn and everything else.
Sure, just kind of like cherry pick the thing and, keep the overall structure. And you don't necessarily have to have the crazy clone Luke, that Luuke or whatever. You don't have to do some of the sillier elements of it, but you can keep that basic storyline.
Ronaldo says, I always wonder what Filoni's opinion, what was Filoni's opinion of the sequels?
Yeah, he's never actually...
Smart.
I mean, Favreau is sort of gone on record as not really liking them, but...
Yeah. Mother Vansel tends to agree with me. That's why I love Mother Vansel. And Ronaldo says, if it happens, let the story be different. If it's the same, it'll just be boring.
Yeah, I'm assuming that he's talking about
the reboot, like if you're gonna don't work around the existing story, just do something brand new, because otherwise, if you use the same thing, it's going to be boring.
Well, unless, of course, and there is another alternative, though. There is a third alternative that would be sort of the best of both worlds, and it's something that I brought up a while ago.
Do the best of both worlds? Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's Between Worlds.
The World Between Worlds. Well, Best of Both Worlds is the title of the Next Generation, Star Trek Next Generation episode.
Yep.
Very good one, too.
Mm-hmm.
No, what they could do is you could tell the Timothy Zahn trilogy story, but use the sequel trilogy characters.
Right.
That would be the way that you can sort of give everybody the best of both worlds, because you could essentially still include the original characters too.
Right.
You just morph it a little bit, but I don't know. If I were them, I don't know if this is a good idea. I still think that the best idea for them is to just move forward with the stories they're telling now, and then when they've told like 5 or 10 years worth of Star Wars content that they got out, by the time they start to butt up against the sequel trilogy timeline, change it then. Because then it'll be a natural, organic thing. And I don't think that anybody would really bother with it. But what about you guys? I mean, you're out there either watching us live or you're watching the rebroadcast. If so, let us know what you guys think they should do in the comment section. Do you think that they should go ahead and reboot it? Or do you think that they should leave well enough alone? Let us know. All right, what do we got next?
Next, I think Ronaldo has one more. He said, if you ask me, adapt the Yuuzhan Vong with the Skywalker grandchildren as protagonists.
Well, that's another good point, too. They could actually go into some of the other stuff, but remember, that still follows the Timothy Zahn timeline.
Right.
All right, but now we're going kind of into series news a little bit still, but now it's a little bit of a different thing.
Yeah, so the Acolyte, the High Republic is actually setting up the Acolyte.
Which is really interesting to me.
Yeah. So basically what's going to happen is towards the end of the High Republic series, we're going to get the Acolyte, and there's been some speculation as far as like what it could possibly be. Now, it just dawned on me.
You talking about the Acolyte series? What the Acolyte could possibly be?
Well, no, not so much that, but
or like how it's setting it up.
Yeah, or the fact that some people have said that the Acolyte is actually going to take place almost kind of like that whole Lion King 1.5, where the events of the High Republic are going to be seen through the eyes of the Acolyte.
Oh,
that type of thing. Yeah. So,
kind of like a little Dark Side Lost Stars thing going.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it did also make me wonder, because it's called the Acolyte, so it's like I'm thinking of one person like the Mandalorian. So, is it just one person, or is it just, and like who were they, kind of following at that point?
Yeah, that's true, because we know an Acolyte is basically like a Sith Padawan.
Right.
But who's the master? Well, do you remember what the time period was that the Acolyte's supposed to take place?
Like I said, it's right. It kind of like overlaps the end of the High Republic. So almost kind of like how we saw Clone Wars, how it kind of overlapped
episode 3,
kind of in that type of fashion. That's what I'm getting from it. But here we go. So this takes place approximately like, the Acolyte is roughly like 100, 200 years, like I said before, Skywalker saga, which is pretty much at the end of the High Republic. It could focus on Sith lore. Given that the High Republic era, it was a time period where the Galactic Republic was at its height of its power and the Jedi were patrolling the galaxy in full force. The Sith were not considered an immediate threat as no Jedi knew of their whereabouts or existence. It doesn't mean that they weren't around or that Sith lore couldn't be explored, especially the Rule of Two, as well as the Sith worlds and Sith characters featured in other Star Wars paraphernalia.
Well, it almost sounds to me like this is going to be talking about, like, you could almost call this thing the Rise of the Sith.
Yeah, almost.
Because it could be that the Acolyte is just maybe the first Sith to come back after all this time, and that's kind of the level that they're at, and we watch them grow up, and then, of course, wouldn't it be cool if that Acolyte were Bane or something? You know what I mean? It's like something along those lines. Or the Acolyte might be the apprentice of somebody like Bane.
Or it could be like Plagueis or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be exactly. Well, I'm just thinking Bane was the one with the Rule of Two now.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'm not entirely sure, though, because when they would talk about all these other Sith Lords, right? And I'm sure I'm sure Ronaldo's going to chat this in at some point. Jason, of course, he always leaves. Basically, he watches the show and he gives like these incredible summaries of his thoughts on stuff. So he might shed a little light on this too. But I'm thinking that this is probably going to shine a little bit of light also on how the Sith came back. Because remember, the Jedi thought they were gone for like a millennia or something. So this is going to tell us a little bit about either what they were doing all this time or how did they come back. And they're coming back as just under the Rule of Two. And they're working in the shadows. And maybe we'll get a little bit of history on how that happened. Because if you just look at all the guys, and, everybody will talk about all these Sith Lords, and everybody's like, what? But it's because it's like, okay, here's all these guys that were around, but we don't really have like a firm timeline, really.
Right, like a concrete thing, right?
Yeah, well, and especially because they just dropped this whole High Republic era on us out of nowhere. And so now you have to really sort of align with, okay, this is fitting here, and then now where is the overlap? Because before all you had was the Old Republic, and then like 10,000 years later, you had the Phantom Menace. So nobody's really gone into that time period between, and we always assume that, hey, the old Republic just was kind of there, and then it just morphed into the Republic, and, that's the way it was. We didn't even know there was another era set in that.
True.
So that means that now you can't be quite as loose about when the Sith come around again. Because you have to wonder, well, where are they in the High Republic?
Yeah.
When did their light sort of go? Well, they're dark, but
Yeah, come on.
the
black light, come on, shall we say.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, when did they sort of go by the wayside, and then when did they come back? Now, if the Acolyte actually answers that, that's great. But the other question is, are we going to start to get some Acolyte prequel material in some of the later High Republic stuff?
I think we might. There's some things that are being said in regards to that. So things that we know, it will be connected to the High Republic comics. Disney has conveyed that the High Republic era will be brought to fans in a multimedia format through a series of comics and novels, by which they will be able to form a homogeneous concept of the peak of the Jedi's powers and influence in the galaxy. Whereas the High Republic multimedia project will focus on the high point of the Jedi Order, the Acolyte will focus on its low point and waning years, paving the way for the nefarious plot developed by George Lucas in the prequel trilogy.
Well, and I'm also wondering, too, going into some of that as well, like, are they going to eventually give us some High Republic shows?
I think this whole thing is all one big setup, I think we're all going to get I think this is the new direction that Star Wars is going in, and it makes sense, and I get it, especially if this stuff takes off. And I think that's why they're kind of setting it up via comic and then novels, and so that way, when it comes out with the show, it's like, okay, we all kind of have a foundation of what this is. We do know that it will feature a female protagonist, though. Leslie Headland, who's actually over the Acolyte, has confirmed that the series will be female-centric. So this might be that female-centric thing that we were all, talking about, and feature a female protagonist, but not to deride of male characters. She has said that as a woman, she's always associated with male characters she's invested in, but thinks the same can apply to female leads and male fans. The other theory is, like I said, it could feature Darth Plagueis. Given the series that it will feature a female protagonist, it's difficult to say if there will be a place for Plagueis, but given the time period, it's possible that he could train a female Sith apprentice prior to Palpatine, who may not even be born. If he's not seen, then perhaps he'll be mentioned in passing to tie the series to the prequel trilogy. Now, one thing I thought about with this was that I could see something to the fact of, some young girl or whatever, she's kind of stumbles upon some holocrons, and that kind of captures her. Maybe she's kind of living a dark life, or things have happened to her that, maybe not the best, of life circumstances. And then she kind of stumbles across a Sith holocron, and as she's reading it, she's like, becomes more intrigued and more intriguing. So then she starts, what? Yeah, this is how I feel. And yeah, this is, like
somebody finally gets me.
Right, exactly. And yeah, if I had the power to do this, I would just wipe out everybody because no one, and so then you can see that anger starting to build. And then now, she kind of ends up becoming an acolyte, maybe unintentionally. And so to me, that would be a cool story, honestly.
Well, I mean, the thing is that we've never really seen anything when it comes to Sith training.
Right.
I mean, very few things. It's one of the things that I always thought was missing from the Star Wars universe is we see the Jedi perspective.
Yep.
And we have Padawans and stuff like that. But first of all, we didn't even know that the Sith were acolytes until not too long ago. And then, of course, now they're coming out with this series. But it's always fascinating to me to see a blossoming Sith Lord coming out. I mean, that's one of those things that you just don't really see. Like, what leads them to that? I mean, they've always portrayed it as either disillusioned Jedi that turn to the dark side, or you would get these people that would turn to the dark side, but they just, it's almost like they're there. What actually leads up to that? And it's kind of like you said.
Like we just saw Maul, he's automatically a Sith Lord.
Yeah, and I mean, they were kind of alluding to that a little bit when they gave Savage's whole backstory, and you can go, okay, this is sort of what happened. They basically said this is what happened to Maul too, but to actually see, this is pretty much not only how the Sith identify an apprentice, but then how they end up being trained and things like that. Now, we don't know how deep the Acolyte's going to go into, where I think a lot of this is concerned. Right. You know, because otherwise you'd think it would just be called Sith Apprentice or something. Because think about it, in the marketing, if you just call this thing the Acolyte, I mean, what is that?
Exactly.
Sure, we know what it is, but the casual fans can be like, I don't even know what that is. What does that even mean? If you called something like the Sith Apprentice, see, that gets more viewers and more marketing. So
yeah, because Trump already stole the Apprentice, so we can't use that. Some people believe that he is a Sith Apprentice.
There you go. You're fired. Force lightning. But I mean, it's one of those things that I just think that they could really do something interesting and really delve into the whole idea of what does a Sith in training go through? What are the events that actually lead up to it?
Yeah, because we can only see some stuff like with Ventress in Jedi Lost, like in the book. But
That's
we never
what I was thinking of.
But we never actually truly see it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I would have even been really happy if this had been a Ventress-centric series. That's what I would have liked to have seen, to be honest.
Something else that's known about this series is that Rain Roberts will co-create and executive produce The Acolyte. And now she's the co-creator and executive producer. And unlike Hedlund, who has had a great deal of experience with the Star Wars brand as the current vice president of film development at Lucasfilm. She's been involved in all the Star Wars projects since Disney purchased Lucasfilm in 2014, including the sequel trilogy, Rogue One, Star Wars Story, and Star Wars Rebels. Along with the Acolyte, Rain is also going to be developing further Star Wars movies for Disney, though their release date have not been set yet.
Well, it is interesting to me that they're just pumping out all this material for Disney Plus. In fact, I'm waiting for when they announce an actual full-length movie for Disney Plus.
Yeah.
That's going to be a little bit strange because on one hand, I want to see it, but on the other hand, I don't really want to be deprived of Star Wars in the theater.
Yeah.
That's where it got its start, after all.
True.
But on the other hand, I'm pretty content with Disney Plus, though. I kind of like, oh, there's a new Star Wars thing on, and I'm sort of conditioned for that. So if you give me, a 2-hour Star Wars movie on Disney Plus, I'll be all right with it.
Definitely.
And I think for the standalone stuff, it would be okay. But I'm intrigued, though, that it's the High Republic that's setting us up for this.
Yeah, and that's cool.
And I like the fact that they're tying this stuff in. Once again, they're actually doing things correctly. See, on television, they have no problems where they're using this. And I think that what they could do is, on one end of the spectrum, they got the Mandalorian that's seeding out all these different series.
The High Republic is also kind of filling in the
Sure, that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum because the Mandalorian's taking place post Return of the Jedi. The High Republic is taking place like way before the Phantom Menace. So now you can use the High Republic to kind of seed out different things from that end of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
So I think that they're on the right track, and I think this is good. But what about you guys? What are you guys thinking? Are you more intrigued now about the Acolyte series because it has some connection to the High Republic? Let us know in the comment section below. All right, looks like we've got some Mandalorian Season 3 updates.
Mando. All right. So, of course, at the end of the second season created, a lot of conversation, both with the casual and diehard fans alike. And, we see it end with Din walking off without his little green companion, Grogu. He is now in the hands of Jedi Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. And so there are some reports that have come out about the highly anticipated season 3 release date. It says reports that Mandalorian season 3 is set to begin filming in Los Angeles on April 5th, 2021. The report remains as unconfirmed as of now, but the date does seem to line up with the Star Wars timeline, and Lucasfilm executives have been hinting as of late. Assuming that this report is accurate, the start date provides us with a fairly good idea of what the premiere window might look like for The Mandalorian Season 3.
Yeah, but isn't The Mandalorian supposed to premiere in like January of next year?
You know, it says April 21 at 2021 as of start date. It will indicate that it will possibly premiere as early as April of 2022.
As early as? I was kind of hoping to premiere in January of 2022.
Well,
I mean, I know we got the Book of Boba Fett that's coming out in December.
Right, so that might carry us.
See, and that's what I was thinking. That's what I was afraid of, because when they announced that, it's like, well, wait a minute. This series now is actually taking the place of when The Mandalorian would normally premiere.
Right.
So I'm like, well, when's The Mandalorian going to premiere now? And so now it looks like it's going to be even later. I mean, shouldn't we be getting Bad Batch pretty soon, speaking of which?
True. Yep, we should be. Yeah, it's probably roughly like maybe a week or two away.
Yeah, so I mean, if they do a thing to where it's like, okay, look, man, if they could get to the point where every 2 or 3 months they got a new season of a show, I'll probably be okay with it. Because if you think about it right now, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, it's when The Mandalorian's the only thing you got, it's like, great, you get us all Prime, we see like 8 episodes of this thing, and cool, now you got to wait another year. Whereas if you actually have Andor, Obi-Wan, the Acolyte,
Yep.
you know, Ahsoka, it's probably like about Rangers of the New Republic, Lando. You know, you have all these series, right? It's like 6 shows. So if you're doing it like every 2 months, I'm getting the next season of whatever the show is. I'm not necessarily going to miss The Mandalorian, because by the time I get through whatever season we're on of each of these shows, 2 months later, I get The Mandalorian again. It's almost like you're just
replacing one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really difficult to me, though, to actually just sit there and try to wait for all this stuff, because the problem is I get heavily invested in these shows and these characters, which is what, of course, they want.
Right.
And then when you have to wait, it's just so difficult. It's no different than, and I don't really think it makes a difference whether they're releasing these episodes week to week or if they just release them all in one day.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think we just need enough content where it's like, okay, now we're not going lacking for too long without any good Star Wars content, especially if they're pushing these movies behind. You know, that's the thing. The movies keep getting pushed back and further and further and further back. And so...
Well, when's the next one? 2023?
Yeah, somewhere around there. But like I said, if you got stuff that's kind of ties you over, because, you know, the Obi-Wan things are limited. So some things are limited runs. So Obi-Wan may only go like one season.
Well, that's true, yeah.
So, you know, so now you're going to have that gap where...
Yeah, but it seems like they're developing all these other series, though, in its place.
Right.
And if they do that, like maybe maybe you don't have something that's going from season to season. Maybe you just have, okay, this is the one and done for Obi-Wan, but now we have another limited thing. Because I'm got to wonder if the Book of Boba Fett is actually a limited series or if that's going to go on.
That's a limited one, I think, as well.
Yeah, because it would make sense to me to actually have the Book of Boba Fett, which gives us a little bit... Because in something like that, they could dedicate the story to him. The problem in The Mandalorian is he's part of a bigger show.
Right.
So you can't dedicate, especially when you only got 8 episodes. I mean, if this is like a 22-episode season, you could do a 3 or 4 episode story arc on Boba Fett. Easy.
Oh, yeah.
But if you only got like 8 episodes, and 4 episodes would be like half the season. Right? So you have to go, okay, let's give him his own limited series, catch everybody up on what he's doing, maybe let everybody know how he got out of the Sarlacc pit. Kind of, this is how he dealt with the whole Jabba the Hutt thing. And now he can be part of the ensemble again in The Mandalorian, but we only have to feature him like maybe 2 episodes per season or something.
Right. Let's go to the chats real quick.
Sure.
Ronaldo says there were rumors of a High Republic animated series.
Oh, that would be...
Now, that would be cool.
That would be really cool.
That would be rocking.
I honestly think that they have to bring this into television at some point.
Oh, yeah. And I think that would be the perfect way to introduce it.
Yeah, if they did an animated series, because if you think about it, that's how we were introduced to the Clone Wars. And the Clone Wars was a very vast, lots of stories. They have lots of things that they have to do. I think that an animated series would just really open things up. And they're sort of doing that almost anyway, right? Remember those shorts that they were doing?
Well, yeah, but now we even have like Bad Batch. I mean, like I said, that was a small story arc, and now it's its own series now.
Yeah, and I still have mixed
I
feelings about that show.
Me too, but I just have to wait and see. We said the same thing about Rebels, and we loved it. So
but not right away though.
No, that's true.
So we're kind of like, ooh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like Aladdin with a lightsaber. I don't know.
Street rat.
Let's see. Ronaldo also says, didn't Plagueis have didn't Plagueis have 7 apprentices? Maybe one of them is the Acolyte.
Did he?
Possibly. I mean, of course, we all know Palpatine, but I'm not saying that. And depending on Plagueis' species, I mean, he could have lived for a while, so I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is possible. I don't know. It's funny because there was a point to where I was really read up on a lot of these Sith Lords and what they did and all that stuff. But then once the EU was trashed,
yeah, you kind of lose a lot.
The other that's the part. And again, I'm the guy that really said, look, I get why you're doing this. I understand why you got to trash it, start over, and then make everything where it's all canon and there's continuity and all this stuff. I was totally on board for it. But at the same time, there was a small part of me that was like, great. I spent all this time learning all this other crap, and now it's null and void. Or I have to learn different crap. So, because there's like Darth Nihilus. There's like all these like weird Sith Lords that are out there, right? And then where they're falling in which timeline. That's what I was talking about a couple of segments ago, is that it's really hard to
keep up. Yeah,
to figure out like where these guys are falling. So, sure, I'll go with Plagueis could have had 7 apprentices.
And this happens to be one that we're...
I mean, and that's true. In fact, it would be kind of cool if maybe this is the predecessor to Palpatine.
Mm-hmm.
Very much the way a Maul and a Dooku were the predecessors to Anakin. And Anakin's the one that basically stuck, becomes Darth Vader, most iconic villain of all time.
Yep.
So maybe this is the pre-Palpatine.
Let's see. Ronaldo also says, man, it's hard to wait so long. I need to see what happens with the Darksaber. I hear you, man. We also need to consider now we have new content from the other franchises. So they need to show new content besides Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it. Disney Plus can't just be the Star Wars network. You have a lot of the Marvel stuff, but you also have to remember, too, that Marvel just doesn't seem to translate that well to television.
Yeah.
It almost has the opposite problem with Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Star Wars, the way that they've done it, it lends itself to that. Whereas the Marvel stuff, I don't know. I tried watching a couple of Marvel shows.
The Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And I just really wasn't into it.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't do anything for me. I don't care. I mean, I'm going to give the Loki thing a shot because that's interesting, and they got Tom Hiddleston actually playing him.
Right, I was about to say, he's actually playing him, and that's the thing, you're actually getting like the actual,
it's almost like
characters that you're seeing versus like, okay, who cares about what Reggie's doing? He's just like one of these little agents. Like,
well, it would almost be like on the DC side. It's like Okay, you have Justice League, you have all this stuff, and guess what? We're coming out with a new TV series, The Wonder Twins. You know, it's like
what's god awful right now, Batwoman. Oh my Lord!
Oh, you know what I've heard about?
Christ.
I've heard some pretty bad things about that. Well, you know what, DC. Now, the odd thing is, most of the time, DC actually does translate well to TV. But
True, like Arrow and Flash.
Sure, and then even back with Smallville and all that, and then of course
Supergirl, yep.
Gotham. So, but what's different about the way DC handles it is that the DC version, it's almost like television is one universe, and then the movies are another universe. And you'll get a little bit of crossover. Like, I love the fact about how they brought, Michael Keaton Batman as Batman back. You have Brandon Routh as Superman, Tom Welling as Superman. They basically have brought everybody that's played these characters into this multiverse thing.
Right.
But by and large, you have the television or the TV verse, and then you have the cinematic universe. Whereas Marvel is actually trying to continue their whole cinematic universe on television.
Right.
And it's just
not.
Yeah, it's just not. Exactly. Whereas Star Wars is doing it, and they're doing it successfully. So, on one hand, I agree with Ronaldo that, because, they're even talking about like Indiana Jones stuff and all this again. They do have other franchises at which they got to look, but at the same time, you also have to go with what the fans like and what's working.
Yep.
And there's no Marvel TV show that's like #1 on the thing. And
well, apparently Tim, he says, dude, have you seen WandaVision? It's fantastic.
Yeah. So I've heard some weird things about it. And that's another one I got to check out. Because at first, everybody was all up in arms because it was kind of like the Vision version of I Love Lucy or Bewitched.
Yeah, it was like the Partridge Family or something.
Yeah, yeah, like some little 60s sitcom kind of thing.
Right.
And then it sort of took a weird turn or something like that. So I'm going to check it out. I haven't checked it out yet, but I do plan on doing it only because everybody's talking about it and I have to see it. And sometimes that happens and I end up loving it. Like Star Trek Discovery. I purposely was like, I don't even care about this show. I mean, I hadn't. So it's weird. Like, I love the original series, love the Next Generation. I started to get into Voyager. I loved the first couple of seasons, and then I just kind of lost interest.
Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine, it was a good show, but it just didn't appeal to me too much. But I would come in and out of it because of all the canon with the other characters. You know, I'd have Worf and people like that in it, so I'm like, okay. And I kind of like Cisco.
Yep.
But Enterprise, I never saw a single episode of it, even though I heard it was a really good show. And then when it came to the new batch of stuff, I was like, you know what? But then they came out with Picard, and I'm like, ooh, well, now I gotta watch it because
you love Picard.
Sure, and it was incredible.
Yep.
And then that led me to watch Discovery because I'm like, well, crap, I got it now. I might as well watch it. Great. I'm really into that too. And then, of course, the one that really surprised me that I absolutely adore is Lower Decks.
Oh, yeah.
The animated one.
Yeah.
Man, that is so hilarious. I can't wait until season 2 of that. So, I guess it just depends on the franchise and how they're handling it. And again, yes, Disney has to pay attention to some of these other franchises, but keep this in mind. The Mandalorian is the one that's actually selling Disney Plus.
Yeah, that was a flagship show. That was the one they were hawking.
Yeah, that was the one, and that's the one that's getting people to subscribe to it. So it's like, guess what? If this is the franchise that's getting people to subscribe to the service,
yep, feed the horse.
You know, I mean, you have to do it.
Well, I think we've come to your.
So is that it?
Yeah.
There was no more on the Mandalorian season 3 front.
Yep, that was pretty much it.
Actually, that's not bad though.
Nope.
Because honestly, when I first saw this as one of the topics, I'm like, really? What exactly are you going to talk about? And notice I said you, because I'm like, you know what? I've got nothing, man. This is you. If you put this on the outline,
it's all on you, man.
Yeah, it's on you. I take no responsibility.
Plausible deniability.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, well we can do this.
Yep.
I'm good with this. Let's go to my favorite segment.
Yeah, man.
It's time to clear your mind. That's right. This is where we answer your questions. We pick 2 questions a week, and then we attempt to answer them. What do we got first?
The first question comes from Ian Gorsh. Why do you think Star Wars was a worldwide phenomenon?
Well, you know what? That's actually a good question for me to answer because I was pretty much there in the beginning.
It's all you, man. See?
Yeah.
Right back at you, buddy.
Okay. Yes, I'll return the serve. So basically, I think that the way that you can answer this question best is you have to frame it within the context of when the first movie came out. Up until that point, nobody saw anything like this. You know, when you used to think of sci-fi shows or whatever, you would see, like, say, a static camera, right? And the ship would basically, like, fly by it. You know, you wouldn't see... Sci-fi was very cold and clinical and things like that. And then comes Star Wars. And the thing about it was you had a compelling classic story combined with just groundbreaking special effects. But it wasn't just the special effects. It was also things like the camera movements and stuff where the camera would turn with the ships and it would... I mean, it was just like such a crazy thing to see on the screen that everybody was blown away by it. It literally changed the way movies were made.
Right.
Because you also had to think about Industrial Light and Magic, who was the company, of course, behind all the special effects that we see in... over half of the movies, because you got DreamWorks, you know, you have some other companies now, but ILM was basically it for a while.
Yeah.
They were created because there was no other special effects company. It was Lucas's thing. It was like, I actually have to create my own special effects company to make this movie I want to make. Because all the other companies were saying this is impossible. We can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, let's figure out a way to do it. And they're still doing it. Look at what they're doing on The Mandalorian.
Yeah, what's on The Mandalorian.
How they're revolutionizing that. And they're doing it with a lot of stuff that already exists. But what they're doing is they're combining a lot of current technology in ways that nobody ever thought to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the biggest reason why Star Wars was such a big deal was innovation. And that was true on everything. It was, and then, of course, there's this great thing on YouTube where how Star Wars was saved in the edit. And the original edit was terrible. Like, the movie probably wouldn't have done anything, but Lucas's wife at the time or whatever came in, re-edited the thing, and that's what we got.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fantastic. So, you know, you definitely got to check that out.
All right. So, this is another really good question. This question comes from Vander Sullivan, and he asks, do you think there will be another iconic villain in Star Wars like Vader as they make new content?
I don't know. I don't think so, because you've had other villains that were really cool, but Vader was kind of the first. Vader's been around the longest. It would be difficult for anybody to say, yes, this guy could beat Vader. We can't bring ourselves to say that.
Well, I mean, not only that, but I mean, saying this as iconic. And I think when you look at the thing, like, you have to, first of all, break down why Vader is so iconic. And, you know, I think it's just the moment, like you said, when you can speak to this, you know, the moment you saw Vader on the screen for the first time, like, what went through your mind?
Well, I mean, you never saw anything like it. It was the most terrifying thing that you've ever seen. I mean, that first scene when, you know, the stormtroopers have already broken through and then they sort of cleared everybody out and then Vader comes out. You're just like, oh, who's this? And, I mean, it was just so freaky, man. And he's so imposing. And then, of course, the next scene where he's, like, choking somebody, like, holding them up in midair and all this stuff. And
feet dangling, and then you hear the crunch of their throat, and then he tosses them against the wall like nothing. That, I remember as a kid watching that. Now, granted, it wasn't in 77, but, like, my first time watching Star Wars, on VHS as a kid, and I'm just like, holy crap. I'm like, okay. And and he hadn't fired a lightsaber yet. And then the next time you see him, he's on they're having this board meeting, and then he's like using the Force and he's choking someone across the table. And so it was just like, it's not only was it inventive or very creative as far as like the cinematography of it all, to which you were just speaking on the last question, but then you're bringing in things that, like, okay, at least I don't know, I can't speak to it, but the whole concept of this whole Force thing, and that it's like this mystical power. It's not even like, it's not magic, but it's just like a thing that just exists in the world that people can channel and tap. Like, okay, well, what the heck is he doing to him? Like, why is he?
But that's a good point, though, because when you think about it, you're repackaging fantasy in a sci-fi package.
Yeah.
Which nobody had really thought of doing. You either had sci-fi or you had fantasy. You didn't really have, to that degree anyway, you never really had the combination of it, because it's basically sort of like the sci-fi shell, but a lot of it was just like this fantasy stuff. And it's really intriguing the way that they did it. And really, if you think about it, even though they've had a lot of really good movies since, nothing has really been done quite like that before, to have that kind of impact.
Right. Ronaldo also says, because it combines things we've seen before with new things. Of course, Mother Vansel wishes us a good night and sweet dreams, and may the Force be with us. Thank you, and also with you.
Yes, exactly.
Ronaldo also says, special effects. Without Star Wars, there is no MCU or Avatar. Absolutely.
Well, and I mean, that's it. A lot of the stuff was groundbreaking. So you basically had groundbreaking storytelling. You had groundbreaking effects. You had groundbreaking everything, all wrapped up into one package. And the thing is, the music.
Yeah, I was just about to get
the music. Star Wars would have been completely different if it had used a different kind of soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually had John Williams coming up with this just crazily cool music.
Yep.
Which, of course, we saw when you see the DSO.
Oh, my goodness.
You saw The Empire Strikes Back. I saw that and A New Hope. And it was just because the focus was on there. And, yeah, you still heard the dialogue and you still heard stuff, but the music was louder. And it was like, wow. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that are jumping out at you that you didn't notice when you're just watching the film. And it's just crazy about all these different things that you have. The droids, how they're different from the typical sci-fi robots that you saw.
Right.
They had personality, but not...
They weren't human. They were just... But you felt like they were.
Yeah, they actually had more of a human thing. I mean, because I even think back in terms of like the Lost in Space robot and stuff, and he kind of talked a little bit humanish, but it was different. Where the droids actually had personality in Star Wars. So there's just so many different factors involved in it.
Definitely. Ronaldo says, I can't see any other villain becoming as iconic as Vader in Star Wars. Not even his cheap knockoff Kylo Ren. He also says, fun fact, some days ago I met someone that didn't know who Darth Vader was. Wow. Because usually people that haven't seen Star Wars, yeah,
that's the other thing about this whole pop culture thing, is the fact that even if you haven't seen it, you're aware of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember visiting Romania and stuff like that, and I talked to people, and they all knew everything about Star Wars.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I saw it on TV there at one point.
Well, I remember just, when people start using it, this was even before I even saw the movie, but I remember like, oh, you can't handle the truth. Like, that's an iconic line, but I didn't even know where it came from until I saw A Few Good Men.
Right. There's a lot of times, or then there's movies that I've forgotten about. Like, I'll watch some movie from, when I was like a little kid or whatever, and then they'll say this line, and I'm like, oh, that's where I got that from.
Right.
Some obscure movie that I'd seen, but I basically adopted one of the phrases or something. I'm like, oh, man, that's where I got that from.
And then Ronaldo also says Star Wars music is not only great film music, it's just great music overall. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny because I teach television, radio, and film. And I was actually explaining to my kids today, honestly, just how, music completely changes like the scope of the movie. It's like, the Jurassic Park Jaws is like when you hear the dun 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 dun, like that, as soon as you hear that, your mind instantly thinks
Well,
Jaws.
that's another good point too, because there's been talk recently that they might reboot that film.
Jaws?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, technically you can because it is source material from a book.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that movie is so iconic.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, you could remake it, you can use today's technology, it'll be better, but
the story, just telling the way you tell the story visually.
Yeah, that a lot of that really depends on how they do it. I mean, they could, like I said, because it is a book by Peter Benchley, and, I remember commenting on the thing like, okay, if you're going to do it, there's two things that you absolutely have to do. One of them is that you have to include some of the other subplots in the book that weren't included in the original film.
Mm-hmm.
So that way it's a little bit differentiated.
Right.
So it's a little bit more faithful to the book, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, you have to have the same soundtrack.
Yeah, you have to. And then here's the other thing, too, though. It's like, and I didn't understand this, until I got older. But, and I was explaining it's funny because I explained this to my students, that you didn't see the shark that much.
Mm-mm.
It was just the fact that you knew he was out there.
Well,
and in the presence of it, like, and then of course when you hear the music, you're just kind of like, okay, are they going to get away? Are they not? It built that anxiety and that anticipation, like, okay, where's Jaws coming from? Where is it? And you're just kind of like in this weird space. And it's so funny because my grandfather often tells me about when he first saw the movie. Actually saw it in the theater. If you're here in like the Detroit area, the Millennium Theater, that's where he saw Jaws. And he said he couldn't even get in the bathtub because he was just so freaked out by that.
Oh, yeah.
Like people did, and it's just the fact that you didn't see the shark, but you just knew it was out there.
Well, and the funny thing about it, and this is where filmmaking, these problems become blessings, because the only reason why that was the case was because they couldn't get the mechanical shark to work.
Right.
And so they finally devised the idea of, well, let's just shoot the thing with barrels, and we'll use the barrels to kind of signify the shark or whatever, and we just won't show it.
Mm-hmm.
But that ended up being the great decision.
Right.
Now that's another way that they could differentiate the reboot, especially because special effects are so good.
Yeah.
And they've got a bunch of shark wranglers too that they can actually use real footage like they do often.
Mm-hmm.
Is that they could show the shark more, so they can make it like the book. They can show the shark more. They can make it a different film, and because it's based on a book, they can get away with it. But yeah, still, like at least the main theme.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like, even with going back to Star Wars, like having somebody as iconic as Vader, it's not just the fact that he's so imposing, like his height, his suit, the way he walked. We did a whole thing on honoring David Prowse and what he brought to that suit. But then you still have the voice of James Earl Jones. And then it's like that just added another layer of like gravitas to Darth Vader. And then of course the dialogue and everything. It just, he had, like you said, I always talk about your favorite scene is like him standing on that platform and he utters the line, the Force is strong with you, young Skywalker, but you're not a Jedi yet. And just that whole silhouette of him is just kind of like, it just gives you the chills, man. And then
completely,
and the fact
that whole Bespin scene is just like, that's horror movie. Like that's right up there with the whole ending of Rogue One.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's true because again, that's probably another happy accident. They heard David Prowse in the suit, and they heard his voice, and they're probably like, all right, who else we got that we can do that?
Yeah, no one's gonna be scared of this guy. So,
even though ironically,
he said if that's what they wanted, he could have done something.
Well, and not only that, but he even proved it in that whole David Prowse thing that during during our honoring him, we talked about that I Am Your Father documentary and actually showed the trailer. And it was during that documentary that he was kind of like, oh, yeah, I could have done it. And then he busted it out and it sounded, it was great. I'm like, oh, man. But again, it would have been difficult for them to convey that because it's easy now because he could just imitate James Earl Jones, essentially.
Right.
And it's funny because James Earl Jones just sort of sounds like that anyway.
Yeah, that's his natural voice, especially at that age.
Sure. And I remember every time... Not just with Coming to America, but also like the Jack Ryan movies. And those always trip me out, especially Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger.
Oh, he's talking to Harrison Ford.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, Vader's talking to Han Solo, but
they're not.
They're not.
Or even in Lion King, like just the way he talked to Simba sometime.
Oh yeah,
you just kind of like. You better listen to Vader.
Well, and then even in Coming to America, when it's like, do not alert them to our presence, I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
They wrote that in there on purpose.
Had to.
Because that was an exact line.
Yeah. Do not alert them to our presence. I shall deal with him myself. I'm just like, yes.
Somebody's fanboying out on that one.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, I just think it's one of those things that, you have to look at and you have to say, look, sometimes these things happen and it's the time period that it's happening in and everything. It's like that perfect storm.
Lightning in a bottle, man.
Sure. Of like time period and circumstances and then of course, the writing and all the stuff that goes, like the general mechanics that go into good filmmaking.
Right.
But surrounded by, because the context, it's no different than, even like with music. It's like if the Beatles came out today, nobody would care.
Right.
They wouldn't even get signed, probably. So if you had released Star Wars a few years earlier or later, it might not have had the effect that it had. You never know. So I just think that it's one of those things that, you basically have to look at.
All right, that's it for me, my friend.
Yeah, hopefully, you guys have actually enjoyed the show tonight. As always, we love bringing this show to you because... what else are we going to do on a Friday night? But if you guys do enjoy the show, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell so you know when we have more shows coming out. Of course, we're going to be live again Monday at 8 o'clock. Not really sure exactly what we're going to be talking about yet. That's always our show that's just sort of whatever hits us. Maybe we'll do a reaction video. Maybe we'll... do another top 10 list or top 5 list or something like that. Who knows? It's always fun. Make sure you guys hit us up at Head to Head SW on our Facebook, our Instagram, and Twitter, and talk to us there. Join our Facebook group, which is also Head to Head SW. I always get this messed up. It's Head to Head a Star Wars community. That's what it is.
Oh,
yeah, the Facebook group. I don't know why, but I always get the Facebook group messed up. Like I can never, and I'm the one that named it. That's what makes it even funnier. I'm the one that named it. But if you guys want a good group of people, well, a lot of times we continue the discussions that we start on our shows, and we'll continue them on that. So, make sure you guys check that out. And as always, join us either Monday night at 8 o'clock or next Friday at 8. And make sure you catch the rebroadcast. So until Monday, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.